I never thought my life would shift on something as small as where I sat on a train. Most days, I kept to myself, stuck in my little bubble of routine. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. But that morning, the train was unusually packed. I almost didn't get a seat, and when I finally squeezed into a spot near the middle of the car, I ended up across from a stranger who would completely alter the course of my life. She was holding a worn-out paperback book, its spine cracked in half, pages bent like they had been folded over too many times. The funny thing was, I recognized the cover immediately. It was the same book I had been reading at home. Not a popular one, not the kind of title you'd see on the front table at a bookstore. Something more obscure, an old novel by an author who had long since been forgotten by the world. But she wasn't just reading it, she was into it. Her lips moved slightly as she scanned the lines, and every once in a while, her brow furrowed like the words were pushing her into some private storm. I couldn't stop myself from noticing her. She wasn't overly dressed up, but there was a sharpness to her. Her hair pulled back in a way that made her face look serious but soft at the same time. She wore no makeup, at least none that I could tell, but her eyes, they caught me. A grayish blue, sharp like winter but alive with something that reminded me of lightning right before a storm. The train rattled and screeched, and I shifted in my seat, trying not to make it obvious that I was watching her. She turned a page, paused, and then let out this almost inaudible laugh. Not the kind you do when something is genuinely hilarious, more like the private acknowledgement of something clever, a joke the world had forgotten except her. And somehow, that tiny sound hooked me deeper than I wanted to admit. I told myself not to say anything. I wasn't that guy. I didn't talk to strangers on trains. I didn't lean across with some half-baked line about coincidences or books or fate. That was the stuff of movies, not my life. But my eyes kept flicking toward her, and after a while, I realized she had noticed. Her gaze lifted, quick but certain, and landed square on me. I felt like I'd been caught stealing something, like I'd reached into her private world without asking. My instinct was to look away, pretend I hadn't been staring. But for some reason, I didn't. Instead, I gave this awkward half-smile, the kind you give when you're caught between guilt and amusement. To my surprise, she smiled back, small, fleeting, but real. Then she looked down again. My heart picked up a beat it hadn't felt in years. Something about that tiny interaction left me buzzing. It was like being jolted awake after sleepwalking through my life. When she turned the next page, her book slipped slightly in her hands, and I caught the title in full, The Last Quiet Place. Exactly the book I'd left on my nightstand that morning, halfway through. I hesitated for a moment, then before my brain could stop me, the words slipped out of my mouth. That's a good one. She looked up again, tilting her head slightly like she was measuring me. You've read it. I nodded. I'm in the middle of it. Her eyes lit, not in a dramatic way, but like I just unlocked a door she didn't expect me to have the key to. She closed the book halfway and leaned just enough that her voice could cut through the hum of the train. What part? About halfway. The scene where he's finally back at the cabin, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Her expression softened in recognition. That's one of my favorite chapters. And just like that, the conversation began. We talked quietly, almost conspiratorial, as though the book had given us a secret language nobody else in the train car could understand. She told me her name was Emily. She worked as a graphic designer for a small publishing house downtown. I told her my name, that I worked in logistics, something that sounded boring even to my own ears, but she didn't seem put off by it. The stops rolled by, and I kept expecting her to close herself off, to retreat back into her book. But instead, she asked questions, real ones, about what drew me to the story, about whether I believed people ever truly find a quiet place in life, about whether I thought the main character was running from something or running towards something. Her voice had a rhythm to it, calm but layered, like she was both curious and cautious at the same time. And every time she paused, she gave me her full attention, like my words mattered more than just small talk. I realized, in that moment, how long it had been since someone looked at me like that, since someone actually listened. By the time the train reached her stop, I felt something I couldn't explain, like I was on the edge of something bigger than myself. She stood, tucking the book into her bag, and for a moment, I thought that was it. A fleeting morning connection I'd remember for a week before life drowned it out. But as the doors opened, she glanced back at me. "You'll finish it soon, right?" "I will," I said. "Then maybe I'll see you here again. Same time." And then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd on the platform. The rest of my day blurred. Work felt like a background track, my mind replaying every second of that train ride, every word, every glance. I couldn't shake it, the feeling that I had just stumbled into something rare. That night, I picked up the book again, not just because I wanted to finish it, but because it suddenly felt like more than a story. It felt like a thread tying me to her, fragile but unbroken. And as I turned the pages, I wondered if fate was real, or if I had just convinced myself it was. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see Emily. The morning after that tense dinner, I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against my window. It was one of those mornings where the world feels muted, like everything outside has been wrapped in a soft gray blanket. I sat up in bed, my mind immediately circling back to the night before. I kept replaying the look on Emily's face, the way her parents' words hung in the air, and the way my chest felt like it was both hollow and heavy at the same time. For a few minutes, I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. Part of me wanted to grab my phone, call Emily, and tell her that none of it mattered, that her parents' approval wasn't the deciding factor for me, that I didn't need them to accept me as long as she did. But another part of me felt the weight of what this could mean long-term. Marriage wasn't just about two people. It was about families, traditions, and ties that stretched far beyond us. I dragged myself out of bed, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat at the little wooden table in my kitchen. The rain outside drummed steadily, and it felt like the perfect backdrop to my muddled thoughts. I scrolled aimlessly through my phone until I noticed a new message from Emily. My heart jumped, but when I opened it, the words hit me like a punch. "Can we talk tonight? Alone. I need to clear my head." It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It carried a kind of distance I wasn't used to from her. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Finally, I typed back, "Of course, come over whenever you're ready." The rest of the day was torture. Work was a blur. I couldn't focus, couldn't concentrate, and honestly, I didn't even remember what half the emails I sent were about. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt, only to sink when it was just a calendar reminder or a spam call. By the time evening rolled around, I'd cleaned my apartment twice, cooked dinner I couldn't bring myself to eat, and paced back and forth so much I was surprised the carpet hadn't worn thin. Finally, around 7:30, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, Emily stood there in the rain, clutching her umbrella. Her hair was slightly damp at the edges, and she looked tired, like she hadn't slept much since the dinner. She stepped inside quietly, folding her umbrella, and for a moment, we just stood there looking at each other. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey," she replied, her voice just above a whisper. We sat on the couch, and the silence stretched uncomfortably until she finally spoke. "Last night was rough." I nodded. "Yeah, it was." She took a deep breath, her fingers fiddling with the sleeve of her sweater. "My parents can be intense. I know they were harsh, and I know it probably felt like they don't like you, but it's not about you as a person. It's about everything else. The background, the traditions, the expectations." "I know," I said, though the words tasted bitter in my mouth. But it still hurt. Her eyes softened. "I know it did, and it hurt me too, because I felt like I was stuck between the two most important parts of my life, you and them." I reached for her hand, and she let me take it, but her grip was loose, hesitant. That scared me more than anything. "Emily, I don't care what they think. Care about us. Isn't that enough?" She looked down, her voice barely audible. "I want it to be enough. God, I wish it was that simple. But you know my family. They're stubborn. They won't just drop it. They'll keep pushing, keep questioning, keep making things harder for us." "Then let them push," I said, a little more forcefully than I intended. "We can stand together. We're strong enough." Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a moment, I saw the Emily I knew, the one who believed in us, who fought for us. But just as quickly, doubt clouded her expression again. "What if we're not?" she whispered. "What if love isn't enough this time?" That sentence sliced through me like a blade. I opened my mouth to argue, to beg, to promise her that it was enough, but the words stuck in my throat, because deep down, I knew there was a kernel of truth to what she was saying. The night stretched on with us talking in circles, about love, about family, about the future we wanted. By the time she left, nothing had been decided. She kissed me on the cheek at the door, but it was distant, like a formality rather than a promise. When the door closed behind her, I leaned against it, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. I knew this wasn't the end, but it felt like we were standing at the edge of something fragile, something that could crack if we pushed it too hard. The days that followed were a blur of half conversations and avoidance. Emily and I saw each other, but it wasn't the same. The warmth, the ease, the laughter. It was all dimmed, replaced by tension and unspoken fears. One evening, I found myself walking aimlessly through the city, the noise of traffic and chatter blending into a dull hum around me. I ended up at a small park where Emily and I had once spent hours talking on a bench under the stars. Sitting there alone, I couldn't stop wondering if that bench would be nothing more than a memory of what once was. It was there, in the dim glow of the streetlights, that I realized something. If I wanted to hold on to Emily, I couldn't just wait for things to settle on their own. I had to fight. Not against her, not even against her parents, but for us. So I made a decision. The next morning, I called her and said, "Emily, I know things are messy right now, but I need you to trust me. Just meet me tonight, please." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she sighed softly. "Okay, where?" "Where it all started," I said. "Our spot." I could hear the faintest hint of a smile in her voice when she replied, "All right, I'll be there." That night, as I walked toward the park bench where our story had begun, my heart raced. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say, but I knew it had to come from the deepest part of me, because this wasn't just about love anymore. This was about proving that what we had was worth weathering every storm, even the ones brought on by the people closest to us. I never thought things would spiral the way they did after that night. The silence between me and Rachel became its own monster, gnawing at every meal, lingering in the hallways of our house, even hanging in the air when we were supposed to be asleep. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe space would help, but instead it only seemed to harden everything between us. Rachel started spending more time at her sister's house. She'd leave with some excuse about needing girl time or helping out with the kids, but I could tell it was just to escape me, and honestly, I didn't fight her on it, because every time we tried to sit in the same room, every time we attempted a normal conversation, it inevitably circled back to that night, to the blow-up with her mother, to the ugly words I couldn't take back. The real problem wasn't just that fight, though. It was what came after. Because in Rachel's eyes, my refusal to apologize wasn't just about her mom. It was about me refusing to bend for her. And in my eyes, her insistence that I apologize was proof that she valued her mother's feelings more than mine. It was a stalemate, and we were both too stubborn to move first. One Friday evening, Rachel came home late, later than usual. I was already sitting in the living room, the TV on but not really watching. She walked in with her bag slung over her shoulder, her hair messy from the wind, her face set in this unreadable expression. "Hey," I said cautiously. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she set her bag down, kicked off her shoes, and finally looked at me. "We need to talk." If there were ever 4 words that made my stomach drop, it was those. "Okay," I replied, turning the TV off. "What's up?" She sat down on the opposite couch, as far from me as she could without leaving the room. "I talked to my mom," clenched my jaw. "Of course you did. Don't start," she warned sharply. "Just listen for once, okay?" I leaned back, crossing my arms, bracing myself. "She's hurt," Rachel said, her voice trembling slightly. "Not just from the words you said, but from the fact that you've made no effort to fix things. She feels disrespected, and honestly, I feel the same way. Rachel, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I'm not going to apologize for something I don't regret. She attacked me first, and you know it. She's my mom. Rachel snapped, her voice cracking. Do you not get that? She's always going to be part of my life, whether you like her or not. You don't have to love her, but you damn well have to respect her because she's family. And family matters. The words stung more than I expected. So what about me? Do I not matter? My feelings, my boundaries. Do they mean nothing because your mom is family? Rachel stared at me, her eyes wet but blazing. You're supposed to be my partner. You're supposed to have my back. But instead, you keep making this about winning an argument. You don't care about how this affects me, about how it puts me in the middle every damn day. I didn't put you in the middle, I said bitterly. Your mom did when she decided to treat me like garbage. And now you're choosing her side instead of ours. The silence that followed was suffocating. Rachel wiped her eyes roughly, stood up, and muttered, I can't do this right now. She stormed off to our bedroom, leaving me sitting there with the weight of everything pressing down on my chest. The days that followed only made things worse. Rachel stopped talking to me about anything real. We only spoke about logistics, groceries, bills, work schedules. All the warmth, all the small moments that used to stitch us together, they were gone. One night, I overheard her on the phone with her sister. She was in the kitchen, whispering, but I caught enough. I don't know how much longer I can do this. No, he won't budge. It's like he cares more about proving a point than about us. Those words gutted me because deep down, I knew she wasn't entirely wrong. I was holding on to my pride like it was a lifeline, convinced that if I gave in, I'd be letting her mom win. But in doing so, I was letting my marriage lose. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Rachel asked me to come with her to Sunday dinner at her parents' house. The invitation felt more like a command than a request. I didn't want to go. Every fiber in my body screamed not to. But something in Rachel's eyes told me that this wasn't optional. If I didn't go, we were done. So I went. Walking into that house felt like walking into enemy territory. Her mom greeted Rachel warmly, hugged her, kissed her cheek, and then looked at me with that same cold, dismissive stare she'd worn the night of the fight. Dinner was tense. Conversation flowed awkwardly around me, like I wasn't even there. Her mom made a few passive-aggressive comments about respect and manners, and every time she did, Rachel's hand tightened on her fork. I stayed quiet, clenching my jaw, trying not to explode. But then, halfway through the meal, her mom turned to Rachel and said, Sweetheart, I just don't understand why you stay with someone who can't even show basic decency to your family. That was it. I slammed my fork down, the sound echoing across the table. You know what? I've had enough of this. I don't know what kind of twisted game you're playing, but I'm not going to sit here and let you disrespect me in my face. Rachel's dad looked shocked. Her sister looked like she wanted to disappear. Rachel just closed her eyes like she was bracing for an impact. Her mom sneered. Disrespect? You embarrassed me in my own home, and you've refused to apologize ever since. And now you sit here, raising your voice at my table? You're the embarrassment. The room went dead silent. And then Rachel whispered, Please, just stop. Her voice broke in a way I'd never heard before. Not angry, not frustrated, just broken. I looked at her, and for the first time, I realized just how much this war between me and her mom was destroying her. She wasn't just stuck in the middle. She was being torn apart from both sides. That night, when we got home, she didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just packed a bag. Rachel, what are you doing? I asked, panic flooding my chest. I need space, she said quietly. I can't keep doing this. I love you, but I can't choose between you and my mom. And right now, you're making me feel like I have to. I grabbed her hand, desperate. Rachel, please, don't do this. We can fix this. Her eyes softened for a moment, but then she shook her head. Not until you figure out what matters more to you, being right or being with me. And with that, she walked out. The days after she left were some of the darkest of my life. The house felt empty in a way that crushed me. Her toothbrush in the bathroom, her clothes in the closet, her favorite mug in the kitchen. They were all painful reminders of what I'd just lost. I replayed every argument in my head, every stubborn refusal to bend, and for the first time, I started to question whether I had gone too far. Was I really standing up for myself? Or was I just too proud to admit when I was wrong? The loneliness gave me too much time to think, and the more I thought, the more I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was the asshole here. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the soft sound of someone humming in the kitchen. For a brief second, my sleepy brain thought it was Mom, like it used to be years ago. But when I opened my eyes and walked into the kitchen, it was Mia standing there, wearing one of my oversized sweatshirts, her hair messy but her smile calm. "Morning," she said, sliding a mug toward me. "Figured you might need this." It was such a small gesture, but I can't explain how deeply it hit me. For years, mornings in this house had been silent and heavy, filled with routines but no warmth. And now, somehow, with Mia here, the air didn't feel suffocating anymore. We sat at the table, sipping coffee. I wanted to ask her a million questions. What exactly happened at that diner? What she'd been running from? Why she picked my town? But the words tangled in my throat. She seemed almost too fragile, like if I pressed too hard, she might vanish again. "Do you ever think," Mia asked suddenly, tracing circles on her mug, "that maybe we're not where we're supposed to be? Like, this isn't the life we were meant to live?" Her question hit me hard, because yes, I had thought that. Every day since Dad left, I'd felt like my life was an echo of what it should have been, like I'd missed the road I was supposed to take. "Yeah," I admitted, "every day." She looked at me, eyes shining with something I couldn't quite name. Fear? Hope? Maybe both. Me too. That was when I realized Mia wasn't just hiding from someone. She was hiding from herself. Later that day, we went out into town. I hadn't planned to bring her into public, but she insisted she wanted fresh air. First, everything seemed normal. We walked by the bookstore, grabbed sandwiches from the little deli, and she even laughed, really laughed, for the first time since she'd been here. But then it happened. We were standing by the crosswalk when a car pulled up to the light. It was just a plain black sedan, nothing special. But Mia froze. Her grip tightened on my arm so hard it hurt, her knuckles turning white. "Mia," I whispered, but she didn't move. Her eyes locked onto the car, wide and unblinking, like she was staring into the face of a nightmare. When the light turned green and the car drove off, she finally let go, but her breathing was ragged. "We need to go," she said, her voice trembling. We hurried back home, and when we got inside, she collapsed on the couch, holding her head in her hands. I crouched down in front of her. "Mia, talk to me. Who was that? What's going on?" She lifted her head, tears brimming in her eyes. I can't tell you everything. Not yet. It's not safe for you." That word, safe, sent a chill down my spine. "Mia, you can't keep me in the dark like this. If someone's after you, if that's what this is, I deserve to know. You're living under my roof. I can't protect you if I don't understand what I'm protecting you from." Her lips trembled. For a moment, I thought she was going to break, that she'd finally spill everything. But then she shook her head, whispering, "If I tell you, you'll hate me. You'll think I'm the worst kind of person." And then she ran upstairs before I could stop her. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying her face, her panic, her words. What could she have done that would make me hate her? She didn't seem dangerous. She seemed lost. But the more I thought about it, the more questions piled up. Who was in that car? Why did she vanish from my life for years, only to suddenly reappear? Why was she so sure that if I knew the truth, I'd hate her? The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to push her, but I also wasn't going to sit by and let this mystery consume me. If she couldn't tell me the truth, maybe I could find it myself. So when Mia finally came downstairs, looking tired and guarded, I smiled and acted normal. We had breakfast. We talked about meaningless things, the weather, the old oak tree outside, even the leaky faucet in the bathroom. She seemed relieved that I wasn't pressuring her anymore. But the whole time I was planning. After she went back upstairs for a nap, I slipped out. I walked to town, straight to the library, where old records and public archives were kept. If Mia was hiding from something or someone, maybe there'd be a trace, something I could find without her knowing. Hours passed as I dug through newspapers, scanning article after article, scrolling microfilm, flipping through old crime reports. First, there was nothing, just the usual small-town gossip that made headlines, local fairs, accidents, council meetings. But then, just when I was about to give up, I found it. A small article tucked into the back of a paper from nearly a decade ago. It mentioned a girl, Mia, who'd gone missing for 3 days when she was 15. The article said she was found safe, but it didn't go into detail. Just that she declined to speak about her absence. My stomach dropped. I leaned back in the chair, staring at her name in black ink. So this wasn't the first time she disappeared. She'd been running for years. But from what, or from who? I folded the paper back carefully and sat there for a long time, trying to piece it together. Whatever Mia was hiding, it went back further than I'd realized. And now I was tangled up in it too. And the terrifying part was, I wasn't sure if I wanted to escape. The weeks that followed felt like a strange blend of relief and unease. I'd thought that once the truth came out, once everyone saw Melissa's lies unravel and Jacob stood firmly on my side, that I'd feel free. But freedom isn't as clean as I imagined. Melissa was gone from my life, completely cut off. Jacob blocked her on every platform. My parents made it clear she wasn't welcome anywhere near the family anymore. And even at work, word spread about what she'd done. She tried, of course, to paint herself as the victim to mutual friends. But the evidence spoke for itself. Screenshots, messages, her own words. It was impossible for her to twist. And yet, sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, I'd feel her presence lingering like a shadow. Because betrayal like that doesn't vanish. Carves itself into your bones. One evening, about a month later, I sat on the porch with Jacob. The summer air was warm, the kind of evening where fireflies blink lazily in the yard and the world feels softer somehow. He reached over and took my hand, his thumb brushing circles against my skin. "You've been quiet lately," he said. I sighed, leaning against him. I keep thinking about how close we came to falling apart, how close I came to believing her lies. If you hadn't trusted me, if you hadn't fought for me, Jacob shook his head firmly. Don't do that. Don't give her that kind of power in your memory. She doesn't deserve it. What matters is that we're here, still together, stronger even. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But another part, the wounded, cautious part, kept whispering that trust wasn't unshakable, that people who claimed to love you could still stab you in the back when you least expected it. It wasn't just Melissa's betrayal that haunted me. It was the fact that she'd been my friend since childhood, that I trusted her with my secrets, my fears, my happiest memories, and she'd used all of it against me. One night, I had a dream about her. In it, she was sitting in my old bedroom at my parents' house, smiling like nothing had happened. She asked me if I wanted to come over and watch movies like we used to when we were kids. For a brief moment, in the dream, I felt myself wanting to say yes. Then I woke up, my chest heavy, tears staining my pillow. That was the cruelest part of betrayal. Sometimes, I missed the person I thought she was. But life doesn't let you stay in that place forever. Slowly, the ache dulled. I threw myself into work, into new hobbies, into planning a trip with Jacob to the mountains. I built new friendships, cautious at first, but warmer over time. And every time I felt the sting of Melissa's memory, I reminded myself of this truth. She hadn't destroyed me. She hadn't won. One day, Jacob and I were walking in the park when we crossed paths with her. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in spirit. Her eyes darted away when she saw me, and for the first time, I felt no anger, only pity. She had lost everything because of her choices, and I realized that her betrayal said more about her emptiness than about my worth. That evening, I told Jacob, I think I'm finally done letting her live in my head. She doesn't deserve the space. He kissed my forehead gently. That's the strongest thing you've said in a long time. And he was right, because the real victory wasn't exposing her lies or cutting her out. The real victory was choosing not to let her poison my future. By the end of that summer, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. It wasn't perfect, it still carried scars, but it was mine. And that was enough. This was the end of the story. Now let's go to the next story. I grew up in a family where appearances meant everything. My parents weren't rich, not in the sense of private jets and champagne on yachts, but they were comfortably middle class with this obsession about how they looked to the outside world. My mom, in particular, had this way of smoothing out every wrinkle, hiding every scratch, making sure that when people saw us, they thought, perfect family. On the outside, maybe that's what we looked like, but living inside it, it was like living in a house made of glass. You couldn't throw anything, couldn't break anything, couldn't even breathe too hard, because everything could shatter. I was the youngest. My brother, Jason, was 4 years older than me, and he was the golden child. Smart, athletic, charismatic. Teachers loved him, relatives adored him, and my parents treated him like some kind of trophy they had won. Me, I was just there. I don't say this in a self-pitying way. It was just obvious. My brother brought home straight A's without even trying, while I had to study twice as long just to scrape by with B's. He played soccer and got trophies. I tried piano, art, even swimming, but nothing stuck. The thing is, Jason and I weren't close. Not in the way siblings are supposed to be. He wasn't cruel to me, but he also didn't go out of his way to help me or protect me. It was like we were roommates more than siblings. He did his thing, and I just tried to exist in the shadow he cast. The summer I turned 16, everything shifted. Started small. My mom kept saying things like, "You should try harder to be like your brother," or "Why can't you be more focused like Jason?" She'd always said stuff like that, but it became sharper that year, more insistent. My dad, usually quiet, began chiming in too. It was like they decided to double-team me into fixing myself. I didn't realize at first what they meant. I thought they were just pushing me to study more, but it went deeper. My parents started comparing every single thing about me to Jason. My grades, my friends, my clothes, even the way I walked into a room. Then one night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. "Jason will make something of himself," my dad said. "He'll get into a good college, get a good job. But her, she's so average. I don't know what's going to happen with her." And my mom's reply burned itself into me. "She'll have to learn. The world isn't kind to mediocrity." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling like I'd been cracked open. I wasn't jealous of Jason, not really, but it hit me that in my parents' eyes, I wasn't enough. No matter what I did, I'd never measure up. That's when I started pulling away. I stopped trying to sit with them at dinner. I stayed in my room. I stopped sharing little things about my day because I already knew how it would end. Another comparison to Jason. And the more I pulled back, the more they leaned into it. It was like this awful cycle. Jason noticed. Of course he did. One night, he came into my room, sat down on the edge of my bed and said, "You've been quiet. What's going on?" I wanted to tell him everything. How it felt to constantly be the shadow, how it felt to be invisible. But when I looked at him, his easy smile, his calm confidence, I froze. "Nothing," I said, "just tired." And just like that, the chance slipped away. But something else started that summer, something that would change everything forever. A secret that began as a small choice but spiraled into something far bigger than I could have imagined. Started with one lie, just one. The following weeks passed in a strange blur. After that night of my sister's announcement, the air in our house shifted. Breakfasts used to be filled with casual chatter, with my dad cracking corny jokes about burnt toast or my mom humming as she packed her bag for work. But now, every morning had this invisible heaviness, like there was a fog sitting on all of us, one we couldn't quite shake. I found myself watching my sister more than I ever had before. She used to be so lighthearted, joking about school, talking about her friends, even complaining about little things like pop quizzes or cafeteria food. Now she seemed different, quieter. She had this constant look on her face, like she was carrying something too heavy for her shoulders. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe she was just tired from school or stressed about exams. But it was more than that. She would come home, head straight to her room, and lock the door. Sometimes I'd hear muffled crying through the thin walls, though she'd deny it if I ever knocked. One evening, I caught her sitting outside in the backyard. She was staring at the sky, but her eyes were glazed over like she wasn't really there. I sat down next to her without saying anything, and for a long time we just sat there in silence. Finally, I asked softly, "Do you regret telling Mom and Dad?" Her lips trembled before she whispered, "I don't know." That answer hit me harder than I expected. Because what did it mean if she wasn't sure? Did she regret opening up? Did she feel worse now that everything was out in the open? I didn't know what to say, so I just stayed quiet, hoping she knew I was there. But inside, I was confused and scared. The next few days, the tension in the house started to show in other ways. My mom became overly protective, texting my sister constantly while she was at school. My dad grew quieter, avoiding deep conversations. At dinner, the air was thick with everything we weren't saying. My parents were trying so hard to act normal. But the truth was, nothing was normal anymore. One night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I went into the kitchen for a glass of water. I found my mom sitting at the table, staring at a pile of pamphlets she must have gotten from some counselor or hotline. Her eyes were puffy, like she'd been crying. She looked up at me and forced a small smile. "Couldn't sleep either?" I nodded, then sat across from her. I glanced at the pamphlets. Bold titles like "How to Support a Child in Crisis" and "Recognizing Warning Signs." It felt unreal, like we had suddenly become one of those families people read about in guides like that. "Is she going to be okay?" I asked in a small voice. My mom blinked, her lips parting like she wanted to reassure me. But then she just pressed her hand to her forehead. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really, really hope so." Her honesty scared me more than anything. The next morning, something unexpected happened. My sister came downstairs, already dressed for school, and said in this flat tone, "I'm joining a group." We all stared at her. My dad set down his coffee cup carefully, like he was afraid to make the wrong move. "What kind of group?" "A support group. A school. For kids like me." I could see my mom's lips twitch with both relief and worry at the same time. She nodded quickly, saying, "That sounds like a really good idea, honey." But I noticed the way my sister's shoulders tensed, as if she wasn't fully convinced herself. That afternoon, when she came back, she looked different. Her face was flushed, her eyes brighter. For the first time in weeks, she almost seemed alive again. She went straight to her room, but I noticed she left her door cracked open, which she hadn't done in a long time. Later that night, she told me a little about the group, how there were other kids, some older, some younger, who shared stories about their struggles. She said it was strange but comforting to realize she wasn't the only one carrying these kinds of thoughts. "I don't feel fixed or anything," she admitted, pulling her blanket up to her chin. But it was different, like I wasn't completely alone. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat on the edge of her bed, listening. And that was when it hit me. Her story wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all of us, our family, the kids in her group, even me. The more she opened up, the more I realized this wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't a wound you could bandage once and be done with. It was going to take time, patience, and more honesty than any of us had ever been forced to give before. But even then, I couldn't shake the worry in my gut, because late at night, I'd still hear her crying softly through the walls. And sometimes I wondered, what if she slipped back into that darkness again, deeper than before? And then, one night, something happened that made all my fears crash into reality. The week after the dinner with Claire was one of the most confusing times of my life. I thought I'd feel lighter after finally telling her everything. My struggles, my loneliness, the cracks in my marriage. And in some ways, I did. She didn't run. She didn't look at me with pity. And she didn't judge me. But at the same time, the weight of what I'd confessed seemed to settle deeper in my chest. It wasn't just words anymore. It was real. And now someone else knew the truth I'd been hiding even from myself. Sarah and I went through our usual motions that week. We got up, went to work, came home, ate dinner in silence, and fell asleep in separate worlds even though we shared the same bed. On the surface, it was normal. But once you've admitted out loud that something is broken, every interaction becomes heavier. The quiet between us felt louder, the distance colder. Claire, on the other hand, became an unexpected source of stability. She started texting me good mornings, asking about my day, and reminding me of little things like drinking water or taking breaks from work. It was strange. Things that should have come from Sarah were coming from Claire, and I hated how much comfort I found in that. One night, around 11 p.m., I was sitting in my car outside the house, not ready to go inside. Claire called me, her voice soft but curious. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked. I laughed bitterly, because going inside feels like stepping into a freezer. It's warmer out here. There was a pause on the line, and then she whispered, "You deserve warmth, you know? You're not asking for too much." Her words cut through me because I had been telling myself for years that maybe I was asking for too much. Maybe it was normal for love to fade and marriages to turn into business partnerships. But hearing her say that reminded me of the man I used to be, the one who believed love could be lasting, fulfilling, and alive. That night, I didn't just sit in my car. I drove to a park nearby, parked under a flickering streetlight, and talked to Claire until nearly 2 a.m. She told me about her own heartbreak, a fiancé who left her 2 weeks before the wedding, leaving her questioning her worth. We shared pieces of ourselves we hadn't shared with anyone else, and in that vulnerable exchange, I felt something bloom that terrified me. Hope. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. Every little thing made me think of Claire. A funny email? I wanted to share it with her. Lunch break? I wondered what she was eating. And yet, when Sarah called me to ask if I could pick up groceries, I felt nothing. No excitement, no dread, just obligation. That night, as I watched Sarah scroll on her phone while we sat in silence, I realized something crucial. I wasn't just unhappy. I was lonely in my own marriage. A few days later, Claire invited me to a small art show in the city. She said she thought I might like it because the paintings told stories through emotions rather than realism. At first, I hesitated, felt dangerous, but curiosity won, and I went. Walking beside Claire in that art gallery was like breathing fresh air after years underground. She looked alive, her eyes glowing as she explained what she saw in each piece. One painting, a messy swirl of blues and blacks with a single streak of gold, seemed to catch her heart. She whispered, "That's me, lost in the chaos but still hoping for light." I couldn't help but say, "You are the light." She turned to me, and for the first time, neither of us looked away. There was no kiss, no dramatic gesture. But in that moment, I knew we'd crossed into something deeper. After the show, we sat in her car, neither wanting the night to end. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I don't want to be a reason for you to run away from your marriage, but I also can't pretend that I don't care about you. I feel something, and I know you do too." I couldn't deny it anymore. He admitted. And it terrifies me. When I went home that night, Sarah was already asleep, curled on her side, her phone still glowing faintly on the nightstand. I stood there watching her, and a wave of guilt slammed into me. I wasn't just drifting away anymore. I was standing on a cliff, ready to jump into something new. The next morning, as I sat at the kitchen table staring at my untouched coffee, I knew I couldn't keep living in limbo. Something had to give. Either I'd find a way to revive my marriage with Sarah, or I'd have to walk away. And both paths promised pain. But one path also promised the possibility of being truly seen, truly loved again. And deep down, I already knew which way my heart was leaning. When I walked back into my apartment that night, it felt like a different space. The walls looked the same, the furniture was untouched. The lights flickered with the same weak glow, but it wasn't home. Not anymore. The word home carried comfort, security, and belonging, and right now, I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and stood in silence for a long time. The air felt heavy, thick with all the words I hadn't said, all the pain I had shoved down my throat, and all the doubt that lingered in my chest. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't end with the act itself. It lingers. It reshapes the way you see every memory, every smile, every conversation. I kept picturing her face across from me at dinners. The way she'd lean in and laugh at my bad jokes. The way she'd nudge my arm under the table, and I wondered, was she already thinking of him then? Did she already feel him in her heart while she was holding my hand? Couldn't shake it. The timeline blurred, and every memory became infected with suspicion. That night, I sat at my dining table with a blank notebook. I told myself I'd write it out. Everything, from the first time we met to the moment she confessed. Maybe seeing it all on paper would help me sort out the truth from the lies. Maybe it would help me remember who I was before all this. The pen hovered over the page for a long time. Then I wrote her name, just her name, and it felt like my chest tightened immediately, like even writing it gave her too much power over me. I ripped the page out, crumpled it, and threw it across the room. That was the start of a long night. I paced. I poured myself a drink, then set it down untouched. I tried to distract myself with TV, with music, with scrolling endlessly on my phone, but nothing worked. The silence of my apartment always brought me back to the same thought. She betrayed me. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was her. I stared at the screen, debating. Ignore it? Pick up? If I ignored it, she'd probably call again, or worse, show up at my door. If I answered, I'd have to hear her voice, and I didn't know if I was strong enough for that. But curiosity won, as it always does in weak moments. I picked up. Her voice was shaky. Hey, I know it's late.
I'm sorry.
I can't sleep. I can't stop thinking about what I did to you. Her words were soft, careful, laced with guilt. For a moment, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered standing in that living room, hearing her confession, watching her cry not because of me, but because she got caught. What do you want from me? I asked flatly. I just want to talk. Please, just hear me out. Why? My tone was sharp, colder than I expected. So you can feel better? So you can unload your guilt on me? You made your choice. You had him. You didn't think about me then. Why do I matter now? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, because I still love you. The words hit me like a knife. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to throw the phone across the room. How could she say that after what she did? Love wasn't supposed to feel like this. Love wasn't supposed to hurt this much. You don't love me, I said finally. You loved the idea of me. You loved the comfort I gave you. But real love doesn't do what you did. She started crying again, and part of me felt cruel for letting her sob on the other end of the line. But another part of me, the part that was drowning in betrayal, didn't care. I ended the call without another word. That night, I barely slept. When I finally drifted off, my dreams were haunted with images of her laughing with someone else, leaning into him the way she used to lean into me, whispering secrets I thought were only mine. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a pit in my stomach. I dragged myself through the motions, shower, coffee, staring blankly at the wall while pretending I was functioning. Around noon, my best friend Mark showed up. I hadn't asked him to come, but he had a way of knowing when I was breaking. He didn't say much when I opened the door. He just stepped inside, set a bag of takeout on the counter, and handed me a soda. We sat in silence for a while, eating greasy burgers and fries. Finally, he spoke. "You look like shit," he said bluntly. I snorted. "Thanks. You've been holed up in here for days, man. I get it, you're hurt. You're angry. But you can't let her destroy you like this." I didn't respond. She cheated. She betrayed you. That's on her, not you. Don't let her convince you it's your fault. And don't let her keep dragging you back into her mess. His words were simple, but they hit me hard. He was right. Every time I answered her calls, every time I entertained her apologies, I was letting her pull me back in. I don't even know who I am without her, I admitted quietly. Mark leaned back in his chair. Then that's the problem. You lost yourself in her. It's time to find yourself again. His words stuck with me long after he left. That evening, I decided to take a walk. Just around the block, nothing major. The cool air felt like a relief, and for the first time in days, I noticed the world around me. The kids playing on the corner, the smell of someone grilling, the faint hum of traffic in the distance. It reminded me that life went on. Even if mine felt shattered, the world kept moving. And maybe, just maybe, I could move too. But just as that thought settled in, my phone buzzed again. Her name lit up the screen. And suddenly, I was back at square one. When I finally confronted my brother and Sarah together, the air between us was thick with all the unspoken accusations that had been simmering for weeks. My hands were trembling, but my voice, finally, was steady. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, looking at both of them. My brother shifted uneasily, but Sarah was the first to speak. Her eyes flickered with guilt, but also with this strange sort of relief, like she had been waiting for the truth to spill out. "It started after the wedding," she admitted. "I didn't plan it, I swear, but I can't lie anymore." My heart twisted as her words sank in. Every memory, the laughter, the inside jokes, the small touches I brushed off as nothing, suddenly sharpened into daggers. I turned to my brother, hoping against hope that he would at least deny it, that he'd fight for some shred of loyalty between us. But he didn't. He just hung his head low and muttered, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." It was like the room spun. My brother, the one person who was supposed to have my back no matter what, had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. And Sarah, the woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, had thrown everything away. I could have screamed. I could have hit him. I could have begged her to explain. But instead, I just stood there, numb. My silence filled the room like thunder. After a long pause, I said quietly, "You've both made your choice, so don't expect me to stick around to play the fool." Their faces fell. Sarah reached for me, tears streaming down her face, but I pulled back before her fingers could brush against mine. "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to cry and make me comfort you. Not this time." The next few weeks were hell. I moved out of our place and crashed at a friend's house. Every box I packed feeling like a burial of the life I thought I had. Sarah texted me nonstop. Apologies, confessions, pleas to talk, but I ignored every single one. My brother tried calling, but I blocked him too. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. But the strangest part wasn't the silence. It was the emptiness. Nights felt endless, every memory haunting me like a movie on repeat. Sometimes I'd wake up with my chest tight, like my body was still trying to process the shock. And then one day, Sarah showed up at my door. She looked wrecked, hair messy, eyes red, makeup smudged. She begged me to listen, said she had ended things with my brother and wanted to make it right. I almost laughed at the irony. Make it right? How do you make right the fact that the two people I trusted most chose to betray me together? There is no fixing that. So I told her the truth, finally, in a calm voice. "You broke something in me that can't be put back. You didn't just cheat, you shattered my sense of family, of loyalty, of safety. Even if I wanted to forgive you, I could never look at you the same way again." She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, but I stayed firm, because for the first time I realized I didn't need her tears. I didn't need her explanations. I didn't need her at all. Walking away was the hardest thing I've ever done. But in that moment, I knew it was the only thing that would save me. Months later, I still carry the scars. I still flinch when I see my brother's name pop up in old group chats. I still wonder if I'll ever trust someone that deeply again. But I also know this. I'm stronger now. Strong enough to walk away from people who don't deserve me. Strong enough to rebuild from nothing. Strong enough to say, with certainty, that I was not the asshole in this story. Because in the end, I chose myself. And maybe that's the only choice that really matters. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next one. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who ended up here, writing this out like some confession. But maybe that's what happens when you're forced to look at yourself in the mirror and realize that maybe, just maybe, you're not the good guy you always thought you were. Maybe you've been lying to yourself for so long that the truth feels like a punch to the gut when it finally lands. I grew up in a house where loyalty was everything. My dad would always say, "A man's word is the one thing no one can take away from him, so don't break it." I lived by that. I carried that into my friendships, my relationships, even at work. So when I tell you that I prided myself on being reliable, I mean it. I wasn't the smartest, the funniest, or the richest guy in the room, but if I told you I'd be there, I'd be there. That's why this situation is ripping me apart. Because the person who was supposed to be my ride or die, my girlfriend of 4 years, the woman I swore I'd marry, turned out to be keeping secrets so deep that when I found out, I questioned every moment of our history together. Her name's Emily. She's the kind of girl who makes people stop talking when she walks into a room. Not because she's flashy or loud, but because she's got this quiet confidence. Long brown hair, eyes that seem to read you before you even open your mouth, and a laugh that feels like it belongs in some indie movie where everything is soft and beautiful. I fell hard, harder than I thought was possible. I was 26 when we met, burned out from a string of bad relationships, convinced I wasn't the relationship type. Then she walked in, and suddenly I was writing her notes just to make her smile, planning little dates that I never bothered doing for anyone else, imagining a future that didn't scare me for once. We moved in together after a year. It was too soon by most people's standards, but it felt right. She brought her plants, I brought my vinyl collection, and for a while it was perfect. Our friends called us the married couple because of how stable we seemed, and maybe we were, until the cracks started showing. It was little things at first. Emily getting distant. She'd sit on the couch with her phone tilted just slightly away, her thumb moving fast, screen lighting up with notifications she didn't want me to see. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd brush it off, just work stuff. Or, it's Sarah. You know how she overshares. I wanted to believe her. Hell, I did believe her because that's who I was, loyal, trusting, maybe too much so. But then came the late nights. She'd stay at the office until midnight, saying a project had her swamped. She'd come home tired, kiss me goodnight, and collapse into bed without saying much else. I told myself it was normal. Relationships go through phases. People get busy. Not everything is about cheating or lies. But deep down, the pit in my stomach grew heavier. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. I had the day off work, a rare midweek break, and I decided to surprise Emily by picking her up from her office. I grabbed her favorite latte, drove downtown, parked a block away, and waited. She told me she was staying late that day, stuck with meetings until 9 p.m. But at 6:30, I saw her walk out of the building, laughing, umbrella in hand, with a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, dressed sharp, the kind of guy who looked like he belonged in one of those tech startup ads. And Emily? She looked happy, lighter than she had in weeks. She touched his arm as they crossed the street, leaning in close as he said something. I froze in my car, coffee in hand, heart racing, my brain screaming 1,000 different explanations at once. Maybe he was a coworker. Maybe they were just grabbing dinner before heading back to the office. Maybe, but then I saw it. The way she smiled at him. Not the polite, casual smile she gave strangers. It was softer, intimate, the kind of smile she used to give me when we first started dating. They turned the corner and disappeared. I sat there for what felt like hours, rain pounding on my windshield, until the coffee went cold in my hand. I didn't follow, couldn't. My chest felt crushed, like if I moved even an inch, the entire fragile wall of denial I'd built around myself would shatter. That night, she came home at 11. Hair damp from the rain, blazer still on. She looked exhausted. She kissed me on the cheek, muttered something about a crazy long meeting, and went straight to bed. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at her bag on the counter. My mind went blank. My hands moved before I could stop them. I opened it. Inside, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from someone saved as Mark. I shouldn't have looked. I know that, but I did. And what I saw made my stomach twist into knots. Tonight was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Her reply, me too. Wish I could stay longer. Counting down until next time. My knees buckled. I gripped the counter like it was the only thing keeping me upright. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't paranoia. This was betrayal, plain and simple. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't know how. Instead, I lay awake next to her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe while my entire world caved in. That was the night I realized I had to make a choice. I could confront her and risk everything blowing up in my face, or I could play it smart, gather proof, stay calm, and make sure I wasn't being gaslit into thinking I was crazy. And that's how I ended up here, about to tell you everything that happened next, how I handled it, and how it led me to question whether I was the asshole in the end. When I left off, I was standing in my living room, staring at the remnants of a conversation that had shattered everything I thought was unshakable about my marriage. My wife, Erin, had confessed something that on the surface seemed small, but in the context of our lives together felt massive. She'd been emotionally leaning on another man, keeping things from me, and letting boundaries blur in a way I couldn't reconcile. That night, after she went upstairs, I sat alone. The hum of the fridge in the kitchen was the only sound, and even that felt unbearably loud in the silence she left behind. I kept replaying everything over and over in my head, the texts I'd stumbled on, the way she looked guilty but also defensive, the words she used when she said, "It wasn't physical, but it was real to me. I should have gone to bed." But instead I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stared at the wall like maybe it would give me an answer. I felt two warring versions of myself. One wanted to believe her, to believe that this was just a mistake, a misstep, something we could fix. The other side of me was screaming that trust, once broken, can never be pieced back together the same way. The following morning was worse. You know how, when you've had a nightmare, there's this brief, blissful moment when you first wake up, before you remember the dream? That didn't happen. I woke up heavy, like a stone had replaced my chest. Erin was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her coffee. She looked up, tried to smile, but it was weak and shaky. "We should talk," she said softly. I didn't want to talk. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam my fist into the table. I wanted to ask her why. But instead, I sat across from her and just let the silence hang until she started talking again. "I don't even know how it got that far," she whispered. "It wasn't supposed to. He was just a friend at work. We started venting about stress, then about home life, and then it became something I leaned on. But I never stopped loving you." I barked out a bitter laugh before I could stop myself. "Never stopped loving me? Erin, do you even hear yourself? You built an entire world with someone else behind my back. Do you know what it feels like to wake up one day and realize your marriage was on autopilot while your spouse was investing their energy somewhere else?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't let that sway me. I've always been the type to cave when she cries, always the type to comfort her even when she was wrong. But this time I stayed cold. "You didn't think this was worth telling me sooner?" I asked, my voice low and shaking with anger. She shook her head, covering her face with her hands. "I was scared you'd think it was worse than it was. I didn't want to lose you." That sentence stuck in my head all day. I didn't want to lose you. But hadn't she already started letting go of me the second she chose him as her confidant instead of me? That's what I couldn't get past. Not the texts, not the fact that they shared late-night jokes or vented about their partners. It was the choice, the deliberate choice, to keep it from me. For days after that, I went through life like a ghost. At work, people asked if I was sick. At home, I barely spoke. Erin tried. She cooked my favorite meals, sat next to me on the couch, touched my arm, but it all felt hollow. Every gesture felt like it belonged to the stranger I no longer trusted. One night, about a week after the confession, I found myself scrolling through her phone again. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. And there they were, older messages she hadn't deleted yet. Jokes, emojis, long paragraphs where she unloaded feelings she never once shared with me. My stomach twisted as I read one where she wrote, "Sometimes I feel like you're the only one who really gets me." I slammed the phone down and walked out of the house. It was past midnight. The air was biting cold, but I didn't care. I just walked. My mind kept cycling through the same thought. If she needed someone else to get her, then what the hell was I to her for all these years? When I finally came back, she was waiting for me at the door, pale and panicked. "Where were you?" I thought. "Don't," I snapped, brushing past her. "Don't act like you get to be worried about me now." That fight escalated into the ugliest one we'd ever had. I said things I can't take back. She said things that cut me deep, things about how I'd been absent sometimes, how I didn't always listen, how she felt like she couldn't come to me with everything. That last part broke me more than anything, because if she had told me she felt that way, I would have tried harder. I would have changed, but she never gave me that chance. After that night, I moved into the guest room. I couldn't bear to share a bed with her. The silence between us grew louder every day. And then came the night she begged me to sit down and listen, really listen. That's when she admitted the part she hadn't told me before, that they had kissed. Once, everything inside me shattered. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't believe how she let me stand there like a fool for weeks while insisting it was just emotional. That kiss, small as it might seem to anyone else, was the nail in the coffin for me, because it meant the line had been crossed in a way she swore it hadn't. I walked out again, but this time I didn't come back until the next day. And when I did, something in me had changed. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the look on Emily's face when she saw me storm into the office. The way her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. And then Jason, smirking like he had won something. It was burned into my memory, and the more I thought about it, the more restless I became. At 3 a.m., I found myself scrolling through old photos of Emily and me. Our trips, our quiet dinners, our anniversaries. All of them little snapshots of a life I thought was unshakable. And now that life felt like it was slipping through my fingers. By the time the sun came up, I had made a decision. I couldn't just let things sit in this unresolved, boiling tension. I needed answers. I needed clarity. Even if it ripped me apart, I couldn't stay in this purgatory of suspicion and silence. So, after work the next day, I asked Emily to sit down with me. She looked cautious, guarded, like she was bracing for impact. "Emily," I said, my voice steady but sharp, "I need to know the truth. No more vague answers. No more brushing things off. I need to know what's going on between you and Jason." Her face went pale. She twisted her hands in her lap, her eyes flickering everywhere except at me. For a long moment, she said nothing, just silence, heavy, suffocating silence. Finally, she whispered, "It's not what you think." My blood boiled at that. "Don't give me that line, Emily. Do you know how many times people in these situations say that? I saw him touching you. I saw the way you looked at him. So tell me, what the hell is it then?" Her shoulders slumped. She finally met my eyes, tears welling up. He's been going through a rough time. He confided in me about his marriage falling apart, and I was trying to be there for him. That day, he reached out and I cut her off. "He reached out? Emily, he had his hands on you. That's not some casual comfort hug. That's something else." She swallowed hard, her lip trembling. "I didn't mean for it to get that far. I didn't stop him right away, and I should have. I realize now how bad it looked, and I'm so sorry. But I swear to you, I haven't cheated on you. Not in the way you think. There's been no affair, no sleeping together, nothing like that." Her words hit me like a wave, part relief, part disbelief, part raw confusion. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But then Jason's smug face came back to me, and I wondered, was she downplaying it? Was she telling me the whole story? I leaned back, trying to breathe. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Why did you let me find out like this? By walking into your office and seeing it with my own eyes." Her tears spilled over now. "Because I didn't think it was important. I thought I could handle it. I thought it was just a coworker leaning too hard on me, and I didn't want to make it into something it wasn't. But now I see it's not just about him. It's about how it made you feel, how it broke your trust. And that's on me." I rubbed my face with my hands, torn apart inside. "Emily, do you realize what this has done to me? Every second of the last 2 days has been hell. I've been questioning everything we have. I've been wondering if I've been living a lie." She reached across the table, her hand hovering like she wasn't sure if she had the right to touch me anymore. "Please let me fix this. Let me prove to you that I love you, that I'm not going anywhere." But my mind was already spiraling. Because here's the thing. I believed she hadn't slept with him. I could feel that in her words. But emotional betrayal? Allowing someone else into the kind of intimacy that should be reserved for us? That cut almost deeper. That night, I slept in the guest room again. I didn't know how to process it, and I didn't want to be next to her while I tried. The next few days turned into a blur. I avoided Jason at work. I barely spoke to Emily at home. And every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be a message from someone saying they'd seen her with him again. Paranoia was eating me alive. But then something unexpected happened. Jason's wife, Claire, reached out to me. She called one evening, her voice shaky but determined. "I think we need to talk," she said. And suddenly, my heart stopped. Because if Claire was reaching out, it meant this was bigger than I thought. After that dinner confrontation, things didn't go back to normal. Not even close. It was like the veil had been ripped off, and all the tiny cracks in my marriage that I had brushed aside for years now gaped like canyons. Even the way she set her coffee cup down in the morning annoyed me. Deliberate, loud, like she was making a point. Every glance carried weight. Every sigh felt like an accusation. Every silence stretched into miles of emptiness. I couldn't focus at work. I'd sit at my desk staring at spreadsheets while my mind replayed that dinner over and over, dissecting every word, every tone, every half-smile she gave her brother when I snapped at him. My coworkers noticed too. One guy even asked if I was okay because I looked like I hadn't slept in a week. And he wasn't wrong. I was barely sleeping. At night, I'd lie awake listening to her breathe, wondering if she was awake too, staring at the ceiling, thinking about him instead of me. And when I did sleep, the dreams were worse. Dreams of walking in on them together, dreams of her laughing at me behind my back, dreams where he sat in my chair at the dinner table while she poured him wine, her hand brushing his arm, and I was just invisible. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, and she'd roll over and ask, "What's wrong?" And I never knew what to say. The worst part, she started defending him more openly, not just in subtle ways, but flat out defending him when I brought up how uncomfortable I felt. "He's family," she'd say, her voice sharp as a knife. "You don't just cut off family because you're insecure." Insecure. That word burned like acid in my chest. In her mind, this wasn't about him crossing boundaries or her letting it happen. It was about me being weak. About me not being man enough to handle a close bond she shared with her brother. And that twisted something inside me I couldn't ignore. One Saturday afternoon, I snapped again. He had come over, uninvited, like always. I walked into the living room and found him sitting on the couch, laughing at some inside joke, his hand casually resting on her knee. On her knee, that was it. I told him to get the hell out.
No politeto un. No pretending anymore.
Just raw anger. My wife stood up instantly, wide-eyed, as if I was the one who had done something unthinkable. "What is your problem?" she shouted. "My problem," I fired back, pointing at him. "He's sitting here like he owns the place, like I don't even exist in my own damn house. And you let him. How am I supposed to feel? Huh." He tried to play it cool, smirking, acting like I was being ridiculous.
Man, relax.
"We're just hanging out." "Hanging out," I barked. With your hand on my wife's knee, the room went silent. My wife's face flushed red. Whether from guilt or anger, I couldn't tell. She shoved his hand off her knee, but not before I caught that flicker of hesitation. That split-second pause where she almost didn't. And that image lodged itself in my brain like a shard of glass I couldn't dig out. He left after that, muttering something under his breath about how I needed therapy. And maybe he was right, maybe I did need therapy, but not for the reason he thought. The days that followed were torture. My wife barely spoke to me. When she did, it was sharp, clipped, dripping with contempt. She accused me of humiliating her in front of her brother, of being controlling, of being paranoid. "You're driving me away," she said one night, her voice calm in a way that made it even worse. "The more you try to control who I see and what I do, the more I want to run in the opposite direction." And there it was, the truth I had been dreading. She was already halfway gone. I could feel it. So I started watching more closely, checking her phone when she left it unattended, reading her messages. I knew it was wrong. I knew it made me the asshole, but I couldn't stop myself. And what I found didn't make things better. The messages weren't outright romantic, but they were too close for comfort. Can't wait to see you again. You always know how to make me laugh. Don't listen to him, you're amazing. And the worst one. Sometimes I feel like you're the only one who really understands me. That one nearly broke me. Because wasn't that supposed to be my role? Wasn't that what a husband was for? To be the one who understood her better than anyone else? I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I carried the weight of those messages like stones in my chest, waiting, watching, hoping I was wrong, hoping she'd come back to me if I just held on long enough. But then came the night everything collapsed. It was late. She said she was going out with friends from work. Something in her tone didn't sit right with me, so I waited. Hours passed. Midnight. 1 in the morning. 2. Still no sign of her. My stomach twisted itself into knots. Finally, I got in the car and drove. I don't even know why I went to his place. Some instinct pulled me there. And sure enough, her car was parked outside. I sat there for a long time, staring at it, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard they went numb. I wanted to storm up, bang on his door, drag her out by the wrist and demand answers. But I couldn't. I just sat there in the dark, watching, until the lights in his apartment went off. When she finally came home, hours later, she smelled like his cologne. And that was when I realized it didn't matter if they had actually crossed the line or not. The betrayal had already happened. The moment she chose him over me, even emotionally, that was it. But here's the thing. I didn't say a word. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when she smiled at me like nothing had happened and poured herself a cup of coffee. Because somewhere deep down, a colder, darker part of me was starting to think. Maybe it's better if she doesn't know how much I know. Maybe it's better if she keeps underestimating me. And that thought terrified me more than anything else. When I thought about how far everything had gone, I realized that this wasn't just a family rift anymore. This was something that could last generations if it wasn't handled carefully. The kids were already picking up on the tension, and I could see how they would either carry resentment or confusion if this kind of bitterness became the norm. That thought alone forced me to reevaluate how I wanted to end things. The therapist we'd been seeing suggested a final family meeting, a closing chapter where everyone would get their say, but with clear boundaries. The idea wasn't reconciliation at all costs. It was clarity. Everyone would leave knowing where they stood and what the rules of future contact would be. I agreed cautiously. Sarah was skeptical, but she also knew that leaving everything hanging would be worse. So we gathered one last time with the therapist present to try and hash things out in an orderly, safe way. The tension was immediate. Sarah's mom sat stiffly, eyes darting around, defensive before the conversation even started. Her dad looked tired, like he wanted it over before it began. Sarah's brother crossed his arms, already ready to pounce. And then there was Sarah, torn between wanting closure and bracing for more pain. I went first. I laid everything on the table, not to attack, but to be transparent. I told them how I'd felt constantly undermined, constantly disrespected, and forced into situations where no compromise was honored. I admitted I hadn't been perfect, but I also refused to carry all the blame. Then Sarah spoke, and this time her voice didn't shake. She was firm. She told them that while she loved them, she couldn't allow them to poison her marriage. She set clear boundaries. If they wanted to be part of our lives, it would only be under conditions of mutual respect. No more insults, no more guilt trips, no more manipulative tests. The room went still. Her mom cried quietly, but not in a way that felt apologetic. It was more wounded pride than anything else. Her dad muttered something about family being everything. Her brother scoffed, dismissing the whole thing. But for once, Sarah didn't back down. We didn't leave that meeting with hugs or reconciliations. In fact, we left with silence. But that silence wasn't the heavy, suffocating kind anymore. It was final. In the months that followed, we saw very little of them. There were some attempts, short texts, a few lukewarm invitations, but they all carried the same unspoken expectation. That we'd cave, that we'd come crawling back. We didn't. And over time, something incredible happened. Sarah grew lighter, Our home felt calmer. The kids flourished without the constant back and forth drama. And I stopped carrying the knot in my chest that had weighed me down for years. Were we the assholes? That question haunted me less and less. Because in the end, it wasn't about being right or wrong. It was about survival, about protecting the family we were building, not the one that was trying to tear us apart. And here's the truth. Sometimes the hardest decision you can make is to let go of the people who share your blood in order to protect the people who share your heart. So yes, maybe to them I'll always be the villain, the asshole, the one who took Sarah away. But to Sarah, to my kids, and to myself, I know I did the right thing. This was the end of the story. Now let's go to next story. So here's the deal. I've been sitting with this knot in my chest for weeks now, and I don't really know how else to get it out other than just laying it all down. If I sound scattered, it's because my brain hasn't stopped running circles since this whole thing went down. And trust me, when I say this, I know it sounds like the kind of drama you'd overhear in a grocery store line or see people ripping into on some forum, but it's my real life and I'm living every second of it. I'll start from the beginning so you get the full picture. I grew up in a small Midwest town where everybody kind of knew everybody, and reputation mattered more than anything. If you embarrassed yourself, you weren't just embarrassing yourself, you were embarrassing your whole family. My parents drilled that into me constantly. Think about how this looks, or don't do anything you wouldn't want people to say about us. It made me hyper-aware of other people's opinions, even when I got older and moved out. Fast forward to now, I'm married. Been married for almost 9 years to my wife, Emily. We met in college, fell hard for each other, did the whole whirlwind romance thing, and got married young. Everyone always told us we were the perfect couple. You know, the kind where people write couple goals under your photos on Instagram. We looked like we had it all together, but behind the scenes, things weren't nearly as shiny as they seemed. The truth is, over the last 2 years, things between Emily and me started to feel fragile, like we were walking on eggshells around each other. The little things that used to be endearing about her started feeling like nails on a chalkboard. She'd get annoyed at my jokes. I'd get annoyed at how much she nitpicked. We still loved each other, at least I think we did, but it wasn't the same love as before. It was heavier. Then comes the part where I might sound like the world's biggest asshole, and that's where the story really starts. I reconnected with someone. Her name's Sarah. She and I go way back. We dated briefly in high school before life pulled us in different directions. She popped back into my life when I ran into her at a hardware store of all places. I was buying some supplies for a project, and she was there picking up something for her dad. We started talking. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was texting her more than I should have been. Now, I need to clarify, I didn't cheat physically. Not at first, but emotionally. Yeah, I crossed a line. And once you cross that line, it's not easy to come back. The first time Sarah and I hung out outside of just running into each other, we grabbed coffee. Totally innocent, right? Except it didn't feel innocent. The way she laughed at my jokes, the way she leaned in when she listened, the way she touched my arm when she made a point. It all hit me in a place I didn't even realize had been starving. With Emily, I'd been feeling invisible for months. With Sarah, I felt seen again. And here's where my guilt started eating me alive. Because every time I came home after spending time with Sarah, I'd look at Emily and think, if she knew, she'd be destroyed. But that didn't stop me. If anything, it made me more secretive, which just made me feel worse. It was like this spiral I couldn't climb out of. Eventually, it did cross into physical cheating. I'm not proud of it, but it happened. Sarah and I kissed one night after too many drinks, and then the floodgates opened. We ended up sleeping together. I told myself it would be a one-time thing, but one time turned into two, and two turned into a routine. I was living a double life, and I was damn good at hiding it. But here's the kicker. I didn't get caught by Emily. I confessed. Yeah, I know. Everyone reading this is probably thinking, why the hell would you confess if you weren't caught? And believe me, I've asked myself the same question 100 times. The truth? I couldn't take the guilt anymore. I couldn't keep looking at her, eating dinner with her, sleeping next to her, and pretending like I wasn't betraying her every single day. So one night, after Emily had a long day at work and was clearly exhausted, I sat her down and told her everything. I expected screaming, crying, maybe even for her to throw something at me. But instead, she just sat there in silence. For a solid 5 minutes, she didn't say a word, just stared at me with this look that I still can't shake from my memory. When she finally did speak, she didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said, "Okay." That was it. Just, okay. And then she went upstairs, got into bed, and turned her back to me. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened, made coffee, asked me about my day, even kissed me on the cheek before I left for work. But I could tell something in her had shifted. It was like she was running on autopilot, just going through the motions. And that's where I'm stuck right now. She hasn't confronted me. She hasn't asked for details. She hasn't filed for divorce. But she also hasn't shown me any real emotion since the night I confessed. It's like I broke something in her that can't be fixed. But instead of leaving, she's just existing. The guilt I feel now is worse than ever. I thought confessing would set me free, but all it did was put us in this weird limbo where I don't know if I'm waiting for her to leave me, or if she's punishing me by staying. And the worst part? Sarah still texts me. I haven't blocked her. I haven't fully cut things off. Part of me wants to, but another part of me is terrified of being alone. So here I am, writing this down because I don't know if I'm the asshole for confessing, or if I'm even more of an asshole for what I did before that. Or maybe the biggest asshole move is that I'm still letting Sarah linger in the background. But the truth is, I feel like I've ruined everything. My marriage, my wife's happiness, maybe even my own future. And I don't know if there's a way back from this. When I woke up the next morning, I was already exhausted before my feet even touched the floor. I had been tossing and turning all night, replaying last night's confrontation in my head. My mom's harsh words cut deeper than she probably realized, and I couldn't shake them. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at my hands, wondering if I was really turning into the villain of my own family's story. I told myself over and over that I wasn't the asshole, that all I had done was stand up for myself, that I wasn't going to let them manipulate me again. But when it's your family, when it's people you've known your entire life, the guilt creeps in like water under a locked door. It seeps through no matter how many defenses you put up. By the time I made it downstairs, the air in the kitchen was thick with tension. My dad sat at the table, sipping his coffee silently. He didn't look at me. My mom was clattering dishes around more loudly than necessary, her face pinched tight. And then there was my sister, Emma, who gave me the coldest look I've ever seen in my life. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound neutral, but it came out weak. Emma slammed her spoon down into her cereal bowl. "Don't talk to me." I froze. "Okay," I muttered, sitting down quietly, my appetite gone. I could feel my dad's eyes flick up for just a second, but then he looked back at his paper. My mom, though, didn't stay quiet. "You really hurt her, you know? She cried herself to sleep last night." Clenched my jaw. "I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You embarrassed her." My mom shot back. "In front of the whole family. You could have just stayed quiet." That was the thing. Staying quiet was what I'd been doing for years. Every time Emma made some snide remark about me, every time she got praised for something she barely worked for, every time I was overlooked, I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. And where had that gotten me? Here, being accused of being the asshole for finally breaking silence. "I'm not going to keep staying quiet while she..." Emma suddenly cut me off, her voice sharp. "While I what? While I get treated better than you. Maybe I deserve it because I don't act like a victim all the time." That stung more than I wanted to admit. My fists curled on the table, nails digging into my palms. "I'm not acting like a victim," I said, my voice low. "But I am done letting you treat me like garbage and then playing innocent." Emma leaned back in her chair with a smug little smile. "Then maybe you should have worked harder. Maybe if you weren't so pathetic, Mom and Dad would actually care about you." The room went dead silent. My mom gasped quietly, and even my dad lowered his paper for the first time. Something in me snapped. I stood up so quickly my chair screeched across the tile. "You know what, Emma? You're right. Maybe I am pathetic for thinking that someday, somehow, you'd actually give a damn about me. For thinking that Mom or Dad would ever hold you accountable for the crap you've pulled. But you know what? I'm done. Done trying to prove myself to people who will never see me. I stormed upstairs before anyone could respond. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I locked myself in my room, my chest tight, hands shaking. That should have been the end of it, but of course, in this family, nothing ever just ends. Around noon, there was a knock on my door. I didn't answer. Then the door opened anyway, because apparently privacy doesn't exist here, and my dad stepped in. He closed the door behind him and just stood there for a second, looking awkward. "Can we talk?" he asked finally. I sighed. "Do I have a choice?" He sat down at the edge of my bed, rubbing his face with his hands. "Listen, Emma shouldn't have said that. She crossed a line." I blinked. That was the first time I had ever heard him say Emma was wrong about anything. "So you agree with me?" He hesitated. That pause told me everything. "I think you both went too far. And I think you don't realize how hard this is for your mom, trying to keep this family together." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, so this is about mom again. Not about me, not about how I feel. Just about making sure Emma doesn't cry and mom doesn't stress out." His jaw tightened. "You're twisting my words." "No," I shot back. "I'm telling you what it looks like from my side. You and mom baby Emma, and then when she says something cruel, I'm supposed to just take it for the sake of family peace. But when I finally stand up for myself, suddenly I'm the problem. I'm the asshole." Dad didn't respond right away. He just looked at me, like maybe for the first time he was actually hearing me. But then he shook his head. "You can't keep seeing everything as favoritism. Life isn't always fair. Sometimes you just have to deal with it." And there it was, the message I'd been getting my whole life, put plainly. Deal with it. I felt the fight drain out of me. "Fine I matterde." Then don't expect me to care anymore. I'll deal with it by not trying. Dad stood, clearly frustrated. "Don't throw your life away just to prove a point." But as he left my room, I realized something. I wasn't throwing my life away. I was just finally admitting to myself that if I kept trying to get love and validation here, I was going to spend the rest of my life feeling worthless. That afternoon, I pulled out my laptop. For the first time in years, I started thinking about leaving. Not just the house, but the whole damn town. Maybe that was the only way I'd ever stop being painted as the asshole in a story I never even wrote. The weeks that followed were some of the strangest and most emotionally draining of my life. By that point, the wedding was only a few months away, and the tension in our house was so thick you could practically slice it with a knife. Emily was walking around with this kind of fragile calm, like she was trying to keep it together, but any little thing could shatter her. And Sarah had this smug energy that made my blood boil. I tried to ignore her as much as possible. I thought if I don't engage, she'll eventually get bored and stop. But that was naive of me. Sarah wasn't the kind of person who backed off. She was the type who treated everything like a power struggle, and to her, getting under my skin was just another way of winning. One night, Emily and I were sitting on the couch planning guest lists and finalizing catering choices when Sarah barged in with a plate of food from the kitchen. She plopped down in the armchair across from us and loudly sighed. "Ugh, weddings are so outdated. Honestly, I don't get why people waste so much money for a piece of paper. You know most marriages end in divorce anyway, right?" Emily shot me a look, one of those please don't explode looks, and gently said, "Not everyone feels that way, Sarah. Some people actually like celebrating love." Sarah just smirked and stabbed at her food with her fork. "Sure, but if you ask me, marriage is a scam. If I were marrying anyone, I'd make sure they had something real to offer, like money or influence. Otherwise, what's the point?" The way she glanced at me when she said that made my skin crawl. It was subtle, like a flick of her eyes and the tiniest curve of her lips, but I caught it. She wanted me to know she was taking a dig at me, at us. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay quiet. Emily kept the conversation light and quickly changed the subject, but I could feel my blood pressure spiking. Later that night, when Sarah had gone to bed, Emily and I whispered in our room. "She's doing it on purpose," Emily said softly, as if she were afraid Sarah could hear us through the walls. "I know you hate it, and so do I, but if we make a big deal, it'll just give her more power." I nodded, but inside I was stewing. It wasn't just about Sarah being rude anymore. It was about the fact that she seemed to think she could say whatever she wanted in our home and get away with it. A few days later, things escalated. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Sarah walked in wearing one of Emily's shirts. At first, I thought maybe Emily had lent it to her, but then I noticed it was one of Emily's favorites, the kind she never shared. "Is that Emily's?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Sarah looked down at herself, then smirked. "Oh, this? Yeah, I borrowed it." She said it was fine. Later, when I mentioned it to Emily, she looked completely shocked. "What? No, I never said she could wear that. I'd never let her touch that shirt." That's when it hit me. Sarah was starting to blur boundaries on purpose. It wasn't enough for her to just insult us or push buttons. She wanted to insert herself into our lives, into our relationship, in ways that made things deeply uncomfortable. One night, while Emily was working late, Sarah came into the living room while I was watching TV. She plopped down next to me on the couch, way too close for comfort, and said, "You know, it's funny. Emily and I might be sisters, but sometimes I feel like you and I have more in common." I stiffened immediately. "What are you talking about?" She shrugged and gave me this coy little smile. "You're practical. You don't buy into all this fairy tale nonsense. Emily lives with her head in the clouds sometimes. You and I, we see things for what they really are." I stood up without even answering. I didn't trust myself to say something that wouldn't blow up into a full-blown fight. I went straight to our bedroom and closed the door. When Emily came home later, I told her everything. She was furious. "That's crossing the line," Emily said, pacing back and forth. "She's trying to wedge herself between us. She's done little things before, but this is manipulative." We sat down and decided to confront her together. The next morning, we told Sarah point blank that her behavior was inappropriate and that she needed to start respecting our space. Her response? She laughed. "I think you guys are overreacting," she said, leaning back in her chair with this smug grin. "I'm just being friendly. If you can't handle that, maybe the problem is you." Emily lost it. She yelled at Sarah for the first time since she moved in, telling her that if she couldn't respect boundaries, she'd have to find another place to stay. Sarah's expression shifted in a second. She went from smug to wounded, her eyes welling up with tears. "Wow," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't believe you'd threaten to kick me out. I'm your sister. I thought you loved me." Emily froze. That was Sarah's weapon, the guilt trip, and she wielded it perfectly. Emily softened almost instantly, hugging her sister and apologizing while I sat there fuming. I knew exactly what Sarah was doing. She wanted Emily to feel torn, to feel like choosing me meant betraying her family. And the worst part? It was working. Things only spiraled from there. Sarah started inserting herself into wedding planning, joking about how she should be the maid of honor instead of Emily's best friend, suggesting changes to the guest list, even making comments about what I should wear. The more she pushed, the more cracks started to show between me and Emily. I loved my fiancé, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was poisoning everything we'd built together. One night, as Emily slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. How far was Sarah willing to go? And what was I supposed to do if Emily kept falling for her manipulations? When I woke up the next morning, my phone was buzzing like it had a mind of its own. At first, I thought it was work emails or those stupid group chats that never seemed to shut up. But when I looked at the screen, my stomach dropped. It was over 40 missed calls and 20 texts. Some from my dad, some from my sister, and a whole bunch from numbers I didn't even recognize. I didn't even have to open them to know what they were about. Word was spreading, and in a family like mine, once something spreads, you can't contain it. People pick it apart like vultures, twisting details, adding their own commentary, passing judgment before they even know what really happened. I opened the first text. It was from my cousin Matt. "Heard about what you said last night. That was low. Real low." I opened another. This one from an unknown number. "You're sick. How could you talk about your mom like that? She raised you. Ungrateful piece of trash." I tossed the phone across the bed. It hadn't even been 12 hours, and already my words had become some family-wide entertainment piece. Except in this story, I was the villain. For a moment, I wanted to delete everything. Delete the messages, throw the phone against the wall, block every number. But then a darker part of me thought, why should I care? Why should I explain myself? Nobody cared when I was being made into the black sheep. Nobody asked me how I felt when I was the constant punching bag for every family joke. Still, the pit in my stomach was real. I dragged myself out of bed, got some coffee, and stared at the clock. It was only 9 a.m., and yet I knew today wasn't going to be a normal day, because family drama never stays quiet for long. Around 10 a.m., my sister showed up at my door. Not a text, not a call. She just showed up. When I opened the door, she was standing there with this look like she was ready for war. You, she started, not even saying hi, are unbelievable. Do you have any idea the kind of storm you created last night? Dad hasn't stopped calling me. Aunt Lisa texted me first thing this morning. Mom is locked in her room crying. And you're just, what? Sitting here like you didn't just blow up the entire family? I stepped back, leaning against the doorframe. What do you want me to say? That I didn't mean it? Because I did. I meant every single word. And don't pretend like you haven't noticed how they treat me compared to you. You've always been the favorite. You've always been protected. And I've always been the one they talk down to. I finally said something, and suddenly, I'm the monster. She crossed her arms. You don't get it. Words cut deep. You didn't just call Mom controlling. You made it sound like she's abusive, like she ruined your life. I scoffed. Didn't she? Her face faltered for a second, but she recovered fast. She did her best. Everything she did, she thought it was for us. You know how she grew up. Strict parents. No freedom. She wanted better for us, but she didn't know how to express it. So maybe she was harsh sometimes, but she loved us. I shook my head. You always excuse her. Always. Just like they excuse Dad for disappearing into work for years, or Uncle Joe for drinking too much and saying inappropriate things at every family party. Everyone gets excused, except me. When I mess up, it's because I'm a disappointment. When I say something they don't like, it's because I'm ungrateful. Tell me, where's my excuse? For the first time, she didn't have a quick comeback. She just stood there, her jaw tightening, her eyes softening in this way that made me wonder if maybe, just maybe, she understood. But then she said, even if you feel that way, you didn't have to humiliate her. You didn't have to do it in front of everyone. That's what makes you the asshole here. Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. Maybe I am the asshole, I said. But at least I said what nobody else has the guts to admit. You all want to keep pretending this family is perfect? Fine. But I won't keep swallowing the truth just to protect everyone else's feelings. She sighed, shaking her head. You need to fix this. Call Mom. Apologize. Before it gets worse. I laughed bitterly. Fix this? You think this can be fixed with an apology? No, this isn't just one fight. This is years of crap boiling over. And honestly, I don't even know if I want to fix it. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Then she just muttered, "You've changed," and walked away. But here's the thing. I hadn't changed. I just stopped hiding. And if that made me the asshole, then maybe I was finally okay with it. That night, the texts and calls didn't stop. Family members kept reaching out. Some furious, some disappointed, a few silent. But the one call I didn't expect came late, nearly midnight. It was my mom. Her voice was quiet, fragile, like someone who'd been crying for hours. "I need to know," she whispered. "Do you really believe everything you said about me?" I froze, because in that moment, I realized the next words I spoke would decide everything. Whether this family ever forgave me, whether my relationship with my mom was salvageable, whether I'd regret this for the rest of my life. I took a deep breath and said, the morning after that long and heartbreaking night, I sat at the kitchen table staring blankly at my cold cup of coffee. My mind was buzzing, not with clarity, but with 1,000 fragments of confusion, resentment, sorrow, and the tiniest sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, this whole thing could still make sense somehow. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that guilty, cornered expression she wore when she finally confessed. The words replayed endlessly. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. It was strange how a single sentence could feel both true and completely false at the same time. I thought about the life we built together, the years invested, the sacrifices, the late nights planning, the way we'd sit on the porch with our hands intertwined and talk about our future like we were the only two people in the world. And now, it all felt like fragile glass shattered across a floor I was too scared to walk across. Every piece would cut me deeper if I tried to pick it up. But avoiding the broken pieces wasn't an option anymore. Around noon, my brother came by. He didn't call first, didn't text. He just showed up and rang the bell until I answered. His face was tight, concerned, but he didn't bombard me with pity. Instead, he just sat down across from me, grabbed the coffee pot, poured himself a mug, and waited. You look like hell, he finally said. Feel like it, I admitted. He leaned back, studying me. You told me everything last night, but do you even know what you're gonna do? That was the question, wasn't it? The one I kept circling but couldn't land on. I don't know, I said, shaking my head. Part of me wants to kick her out, file for divorce immediately, and never look back. But then another part, that part remembers every moment before this. Every laugh, every late night conversation, every time she held me when I thought I couldn't keep going. And I don't know how to just throw that all away. My brother sighed. You're not throwing it away. She did. The words hit harder than I wanted them to. He wasn't wrong. But damn, hearing it out loud made my chest ache in a way I couldn't describe. The rest of that day was spent in silence, broken occasionally by meaningless distractions. Scrolling my phone without seeing anything, staring out the window at kids riding bikes down the street, watching shadows shift across the floor as the sun moved. It was like my life had paused, but the world kept going. That night, she came home again. I half expected her to pack her things and leave, but instead, she set her bag down quietly, like she was trying not to wake someone. Her eyes were red, her face pale, her whole posture defeated. I talked to him, she whispered. I froze. What? She nodded, twisting her hands together nervously. I told him it was over. I told him we can't do this anymore, that I need to try to fix what I destroyed. He didn't take it well, but I made it clear. It's done. I searched her face, trying to gauge if she was being honest or just telling me what I wanted to hear. But the thing was, I didn't even know what I wanted to hear anymore. Why now? I asked. Why decide suddenly that he's not worth it? Because I saw what I was about to lose, she said, her voice breaking. I saw you. I saw the man who stood by me through everything. And I realized that one mistake, one terrible, selfish mistake, wasn't worth throwing away the love of my life. Her words should have comforted me. Instead, they twisted the knife. Love of her life? People don't betray the love of their life. They protect it, fight for it, guard it with everything they have. I don't know if I can ever believe you again, I whispered. She stepped closer, her eyes filling with tears. Then let me prove it. Let me fight for us. Don't give up on me yet. Please. And there it was, the plea I knew was coming. The next few weeks were a blur of tension, counseling sessions, long conversations, and even longer silences. Every day felt like walking a tightrope. Some moments it felt like maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back. Then, in the next breath, it felt like a hopeless attempt to fix something too shattered to repair. Trust wasn't something I could rebuild overnight. Some days I felt like I was making progress. Others, I caught myself wondering if she was still lying, still hiding something, still sneaking messages when I wasn't looking. But one truth became painfully clear. Whether we stayed together or not, I would never be the same person again. Something inside me had shifted permanently. Months passed, and the choice still weighed on me like a stone I couldn't set down. People always talk about forgiveness like it's a single action, a moment in time when you decide to let go. But the truth? Forgiveness is a process. It's a war you fight inside your head every day, deciding whether to lay down your arms or keep swinging. And honestly, I don't know yet how my story ends. I don't know if we'll rebuild stronger than before or if this fracture will eventually break us completely. What I do know is that healing isn't linear. It's messy, it's painful, and it's slow. But for now, I'm still here, still trying, still walking that tightrope one step at a time. Don't miss more stories like this. Hit subscribe and join us now. I used to believe my family would always be my safe place. The people who would stand by me even if the rest of the world turned its back. I clung to that belief for most of my life, through every fight, every argument, every time I packed up my stuff in anger and swore I'd never come back. And I always did. I always came back because, well, it's family. That's what you're supposed to do, right? But that belief shattered the night I learned the truth about my older sister, Emily. Emily was the golden child. Always was. She was older by 3 years, smarter, prettier, at least according to every relative who ever compared us, and she knew how to work people. She could get out of trouble with just a smile, while I could get grounded for breathing wrong. Our parents adored her, and I was tolerated. Maybe that sounds bitter, but growing up in her shadow felt like running a marathon I never signed up for. Even so, I loved her. We weren't super close, but we weren't enemies either. I'd cover for her when she snuck out. She'd drive me to school when I missed the bus. We had a fragile sort of bond, thin, but enough to make me think she cared. The story really starts the summer I got engaged to Ryan. Ryan wasn't perfect, but to me, he felt like safety. We'd been together for almost 3 years when he proposed. I still remember the way he did it. Just us in our tiny apartment, him fumbling with the ring box because his hands were shaking so bad. I cried, he cried, and for a while it felt like my life was actually on track. My family didn't exactly throw a parade over it. My mom smiled politely. My dad gave one of his stiff congratulations. And Emily hugged me. But her voice had this odd flatness to it when she said she was happy for me. At the time, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe she had her own stuff going on. Looking back, I should have paid attention. Over the next few months, wedding planning consumed my life. My mom and I had our fair share of disagreements. She hated my dress, I hated her guest list, but Emily stayed mostly out of it. She'd skip some of the planning sessions, claiming she had work or was too stressed to deal with wedding chaos. I thought she was just being Emily. Then, about 4 months before the wedding, Ryan started acting weird. He was distant, more than just busy at work. His phone was glued to him at all times, and when I'd glance over, he'd tilt the screen away. At night, he'd stay up late in the living room, claiming he couldn't sleep, but if I walked in, he'd quickly close whatever he was doing. I asked him about it once, and he laughed. "You're overthinking, babe. I'm just tired. Work's been insane." And I believed him. God, I wanted to believe him. Everything came crashing down one Thursday night. I'd gone over to my parents' place to help my mom sort through old family photos for a slideshow she insisted we have at the wedding. Emily wasn't there. She'd had to work late. According to Mom, around 9 p.m., I headed home. Ryan's car wasn't in the driveway, which wasn't too strange, but something in my gut twisted. When I walked in, the apartment felt wrong. Quiet, but not the normal kind of quiet. I can't explain it, but it was like the air itself was holding its breath. Then I heard it, a muffled laugh, a woman's voice. I froze. My heart started pounding so loud I could barely hear, but my feet carried me toward our bedroom anyway. I pushed the door open, and the world tilted sideways. Ryan was in bed, with Emily. It took a second for my brain to process what I was seeing. Emily's hair spilled across my pillow. Her bare back faced me. Ryan's arm was draped lazily over her like they'd done this 100 times. "Are you kidding me?" My voice cracked so hard it didn't even sound like me. They both jumped like they'd been electrocuted. Emily scrambled for the blanket. Ryan swore under his breath. But all I could see was the two people I trusted most looking at me like I was the problem for catching them. "Wait. Listen," Ryan started, but I cut him off. "Don't. Just don't." My throat burned. My hands shook, and I felt like I might throw up right there on the floor. Emily didn't say a word. Not one damn word. She just stared at me, her face pale, lips pressed together like she was the victim in this. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I just left, because if I stayed, I was afraid I'd never stop screaming. The drive to my friend Lily's place is a blur. I don't remember stoplights or turns or how I even parked the car. I just remember walking into her apartment, breaking down on her couch, and choking out the words, "They were together, my sister and my fiancé." Lily wanted to call my mom immediately, but I told her not to. I couldn't deal with the explosion that would cause. Not yet. But here's the thing about secrets in my family. They don't stay hidden long. By the next morning, my mom knew. My phone lit up with call after call, text after text, all from her. Finally, I answered, bracing myself for sympathy. I didn't get it. "Why are you making such a scene?" Those were her first words. I thought I misheard her. "What?" Emily told me what happened. "She's devastated. You have no idea how much stress she's under right now, and you're making it worse by running around telling everyone." I swear I almost dropped the phone. "She's under stress? She slept with my fiancé. Ryan told us it was a mistake," Mom said, her voice cold. "He said you two have been having problems for months. Maybe you pushed him away." My stomach dropped. Not only had they betrayed me, they were rewriting the story to make it my fault. That was the moment I realized my family would never take my side. And that was just the beginning. When I finally sat down on the edge of my bed that night, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept replaying the way Mom had avoided my eyes during dinner, how Dad had nervously tapped the handle of his fork against his plate, and how Julia had worn that smug little smirk like she'd just won something. It wasn't just the smirk. It was the fact that she'd been so comfortable, like she knew something about me, about us, that I didn't know, and I hated that I was too afraid to ask. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept tossing questions at me, each one heavier than the last. Why did Mom flinch when I asked about Grandma's will? Why did Julia suddenly decide to help around the house after years of barely lifting a finger? And why, for the love of God, did Dad look at me with that kind of pity when I asked if everything was okay? The next morning, I went downstairs early, hoping to catch Dad alone before he left for work. But Julia was already at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with a coffee mug in her hand like she owned the place. She didn't even glance up when I walked in. "You're up early," she said, voice dripping with fake casualness. "Could say the same about you," I replied, grabbing a glass of water just to give my hands something to do. She finally looked up, her eyes sharp but playful. "You know, you shouldn't look so suspicious all the time. People might think you're hiding something." The way she said it made my chest tighten. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Oh, nothing." She smiled and went back to her phone, but the damage was already done. Dad came in a few minutes later, but before I could corner him, Julia conveniently asked him for help with her car battery. Just like that, my chance was gone. The day dragged on like it always did when I was stuck in the house with her. Every time I passed her in the hallway, she'd hum under her breath or make some tiny remark just loud enough for me to hear. Some people just don't know how lucky they are. Or it's funny how things can change so quickly. I swear, she was doing it on purpose. By the time dinner rolled around, I was exhausted. Not from work, but from keeping myself from snapping at her. Mom cooked lasagna, which used to be my favorite, but the whole meal felt like a performance. Everyone spoke like they were in some fake commercial family. Smiles, nods, and little laughs at nothing. I couldn't take it anymore. I set my fork down. "All right," I said. "Can someone just tell me what's going on?" Mom froze mid-bite. Dad looked at me like I had just kicked a puppy. And Julia leaned back in her chair, resting her chin in her hand, and said, "Finally." That one word felt like a loaded gun. I stood there in the empty kitchen long after everyone had gone to bed, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. My coffee sat cold on the counter, untouched. I was staring at the tiled floor, tracing the patterns in the grout lines, but my mind was miles away, back to every single moment that had led to this mess. Every argument, every secret, every time I told myself it'll get better just to keep the peace. It was funny in a bitter kind of way, how the people you loved most could become the ones you trusted the least. I thought about Mom, asleep upstairs, and how she still didn't know the whole truth. Or maybe she did, but decided it was easier to pretend she didn't. That was the kind of denial that kept this family together. Or maybe it was the glue that kept us stuck in the same destructive cycles. The clock read 2:17 a.m. when I finally moved, grabbing my phone. I didn't open social media. I didn't text friends. Instead, I opened the recording app. I had hours worth of proof sitting there. Conversations, confessions, slip-ups that had happened when people thought I wasn't paying attention. And tonight, I decided, was the night it was all going to come out. I wasn't doing it for revenge anymore. At least, that's what I told myself. I was doing it because there was no other way forward. By morning, I'd barely slept. My eyes were gritty, my head heavy, but my chest felt light, like the weight I'd been carrying for months was finally shifting. The moment I heard footsteps on the stairs, I knew I couldn't hesitate. "Morning," my brother said as he walked in, avoiding my eyes. He poured himself coffee like we were just another normal family on just another normal day. But the tremor in his hand when he set the mug down told me he knew something was different. "We need to talk," I said. My voice came out steady, even though my heart was slamming against my ribs. He froze for a second, then gave me that half smile he used when he wanted to brush things off. "We've talked enough, don't you think?" "Not like this." When I put my phone on the table and pressed play, his face drained of color. The recording filled the kitchen. His voice, his words, the lies he'd told, the manipulations he'd pulled, the way he turned Mom against me in the name of protecting the family. Every ugly truth poured out into the air between us. He didn't try to stop the playback. He just stood there, jaw tight, arms folded. When it ended, the silence was heavier than the words had been. "I'm telling Mom," I said finally, "and this time, I'm not backing down." He didn't move, didn't speak, and that scared me more than if he'd yelled. I walked past him toward the stairs, my legs trembling with every step. In my head, I rehearsed exactly what I'd say to Mom, how I'd start, the proof I'd show her, the questions I'd ask. But when I reached her door and knocked, I realized there was no perfect way to do it, no soft approach that could make this easier. So I told her everything, from the first lie to the last betrayal. I put the phone in her hands and let her hear it for herself. By the time the recording ended, her eyes were glassy. She didn't cry. Not then, not in front of me. But I could see her jaw clench the way mine had in the kitchen. "I wish you'd told me sooner," she said quietly. "I did," I replied. "You just didn't want to hear it." That was the first time in years that she didn't have an answer. The next few hours blurred together. Raised voices, slammed doors, the sound of my brother leaving the house without his coat, Mom pacing the kitchen, muttering to herself, my phone buzzing with messages I didn't open. By evening, the air in the house felt hollow, like we were all living in different worlds under the same roof. I knew nothing would ever go back to the way it was, and maybe that was the point. When night fell, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my body exhausted but my mind wired. I kept thinking about that moment in the kitchen when I'd finally pressed play, how I'd felt equal parts terrified and free. I didn't know if Mom and my brother would ever repair things. I didn't know if I even wanted them to, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to carry other people's lies anymore. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. If you've stayed with me until now, you're exactly the kind of person I want in my corner. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. It started on an unusually cold October evening, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones and makes even the warmest blanket feel inadequate. I was walking home from work, earbuds in, lost in a playlist that should have been comforting, but even the music couldn't drown out the feeling that something was off. Maple Street had always been quiet at night, the kind of street where neighbors waved from their porches and cats slinked across lawns like they owned the place. But that evening, the street was empty. Too empty. Even the rustle of leaves seemed muffled, as if the world had been muted, waiting. I noticed him the moment I passed the old Parker house, the one abandoned for nearly a decade, paint peeling, windows boarded. He was standing at the corner, barely illuminated by a flickering street lamp. Tall, thin, coat buttoned up all the way, face hidden beneath a hood. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, hands in his pockets, staring down the street as if he owned it. My first thought was that he was some random wanderer, maybe homeless, maybe just lost. But something about the way he stood made my stomach twist. Not fear exactly, more unease, like the air around him had shifted. I quickened my pace, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was following me. Not physically, necessarily, but the sense of his presence clung to my back, whispering in my mind, making my heart beat faster than it should have. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door twice, checked the peephole, and told myself I was being paranoid. It had to be paranoia. People didn't just appear in the dark like that and make you feel like your life was being watched. I tried to sleep, but my dreams were restless. Shadows shifted in ways they shouldn't. I woke several times to the sound of soft footsteps in the hall, though when I checked, nobody was there. The next morning, I saw a note slipped under my door.
No signature. No handwriting.
Just one word. Watching. I froze. My coffee cup trembled in my hands. I didn't know whether to call the police, my neighbors, or my own parents. My gut screamed danger, but my brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank, maybe a neighbor with a warped sense of humor. I didn't sleep that night either. Every creak, every gust of wind tapping the window made me jump. By the third night, I started seeing him again. Not just on the street. Now he appeared everywhere. Standing across the road when I left for work, leaning against my building when I returned, always just far enough away to keep me guessing, always watching. The fear started to change me. I avoided the streets he frequented. I stopped going out for coffee. I became hyper-aware of every car, every shadow, every passerby. My friends noticed. They asked if something was wrong. I couldn't tell them. They'd think I was losing my mind. And maybe I was. Then came the knock at my window. I was reading in the living room, trying to distract myself, when a loud tap echoed against the glass. I froze, staring at the window, heart pounding. There he was again. Only now I could see his face. Pale, angular, eyes dark and unblinking. He didn't speak. He didn't move, just stared. I yanked the blinds closed and called the police. When they arrived, there was nobody there. No footprints. No evidence of anyone having been outside. But the note came again the next morning. Slipped under my door. Closer. That's when I realized this wasn't random. This wasn't a prank. This was intentional. And somehow he knew where I lived. Somehow he was inside my life. After the second note, life became a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every sound in my apartment made me jump. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the floorboards, even the ticking of the clock. I started checking the locks obsessively, peeking through the peephole multiple times an hour, and sleeping with the lights on. But nothing could make me feel safe. I avoided the street entirely. I started taking long, circuitous routes to work, even leaving my apartment hours early just to avoid seeing him. Sometimes, I would glance at the corners of streets, at empty doorways, at any shadow that seemed to linger a little too long, and there he was, watching, waiting, always watching. I told my best friend, Jenna, about him one night over the phone, voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to do, Jenna. He's everywhere. I can't even. You need to call the cops, she said firmly. You can't deal with this on your own. I already did. They didn't find anyone. Then maybe you need a camera or something, she suggested. At least you'll have proof if something happens. I hung up, but I couldn't sleep that night. The idea of cameras didn't feel like a solution. It felt like acknowledging that he was real, that he had invaded my life to the point where I needed evidence just to survive. The next morning, I saw him again. Across the street, near the corner, just standing there as usual. Only this time, he wasn't alone. A second figure stood beside him, taller, broader, wearing a hat that shadowed the face. My stomach dropped. He wasn't acting alone. I ducked behind a car, heart hammering, unsure if I should run or just watch. They didn't move, didn't signal, just waited. And in that moment, a cold realization settled over me. I wasn't going to be able to avoid this. I had to confront it, him, or it would never end. I spent the next week researching everything I could about stalking, obsession, and personal security. I changed passwords, moved some personal items out of sight, installed a few cheap security cameras at the doors and windows. but every precaution felt useless. He seemed to know where I'd be before I even moved, like he had some preternatural sense of my life. Then came the message on my work computer. It wasn't an email. It wasn't a text. It was an instant message from an unknown account, appearing directly on my desktop in the middle of a work project. "Stop hiding. I see you." I froze. My hands hovered over the keyboard, stomach twisting. I wanted to delete it, shut it down, scream, but something in me, a dark curiosity, compelled me to respond. "Who is this?" I typed, heart racing. No response, just the blinking cursor, and then a second later, another message appeared. "Soon you will understand." I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. The text haunted me. I couldn't tell anyone at work. I couldn't call Jenna. She would just panic. I was alone, and it felt like the walls of my apartment were closing in. I decided I had to face him. If I stayed hidden, he would only escalate. I needed to know who he was, why he was doing this, and how to stop him. The first step was the Parker house, the one he'd been lurking near since the beginning. I spent the next evening walking past it slowly, trying to see any sign of him. The house was dark, abandoned as ever, but there was movement in one of the boarded windows. A shadow shifted. I froze, heart in my throat, and then he appeared, the stranger, standing just inside the doorway, eyes glinting in the dim light. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He stepped forward slowly, deliberately, and I saw something in his hands. A small, tattered notebook. He held it up as if showing me something important. "What is that?" I demanded. He opened it. Inside were pages full of notes, observations, sketches, even maps of streets, including mine. Every detail of my life meticulously documented. When I left work, what I wore, even my favorite coffee order. "You've been watching me this whole time," I said, shaking, voice rising. He nodded slowly. "I've been watching, learning, waiting. Why?" He smiled, and it sent a chill down my spine. "Because you're the key." The words made no sense, but the implication was clear. He wasn't random. He had a purpose, and somehow I was at the center of it. The confrontation escalated quickly. I tried to grab the notebook, but he backed away, almost slipping into the shadows of the abandoned house. I followed, but as soon as I stepped inside, the door slammed behind me. Locked, trapped, panic surged, but then I noticed something strange. The walls were covered with photographs. Hundreds of them, all of me. Me walking to work, me at home, me buying groceries. Every moment captured and cataloged. And alongside them were notes. Cryptic messages, predictions, dates circled, warnings written in neat handwriting. I realized then that he had been planning this for months, maybe even years. This wasn't obsession. This wasn't random. This was calculated. I needed to escape, but every exit seemed to be blocked. Every window, every door led back to him. The house itself felt alive, bending and twisting to keep me inside. And then I heard a voice. "You're stronger than I thought." It was him, close, too close. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just shadows, just the dim flicker of the street lamp outside. "You can't hide," he continued. "You've been part of this story since the beginning, and soon, everyone will see why." I realized then that the only way to survive wasn't to run. It wasn't to hide. It was to confront him, to understand what he wanted, to take control of the story he'd written me into. The air grew colder, heavier. I felt the weight of his gaze everywhere. And somewhere deep inside, a spark of determination ignited. I would find him. I would understand him. And I would stop him. Because if I didn't, he would control my life forever. The night I decided to face him, everything changed. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew hiding had failed. I had spent too many sleepless nights, too many hours pacing my apartment, too many moments imagining the worst, and I realized the only way to reclaim my life was to take the first step, to go back to the Parker house and confront him directly. I arrived just before midnight, flashlight in hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. The air was thick, the cold sharper than usual, biting through my coat. Maple Street was eerily quiet. No distant hum of traffic, no barking dog, no rustle of leaves. Just silence, broken only by my own footsteps crunching over the gravel driveway. I approached the front door carefully, remembering the locked door from my last visit. My hands trembled as I fitted the key I had found under a loose brick, something I had discovered during a frantic search of the side yard earlier that evening. With a deep breath, I turned the key, and to my surprise, it clicked. Inside, the house was dark, oppressive, and smelled of dust and old wood. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting in the beam of my flashlight. I kept moving, every step slow, deliberate, my ears straining for any sound that might give away his location. And then I heard it, a soft whisper, almost imperceptible. "You're finally here." The voice made my blood run cold. I turned the corner, and there he was, the stranger. But this time he wasn't hiding. He wasn't lurking. He was waiting, seated in an old armchair in the center of the room, notebook on his lap, pen in hand. His eyes gleamed in the dim light, unreadable, dangerous, and yet curious. "You've been following me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why? What do you want from me?" He smiled faintly. "Want? No, I don't want anything. I observe. I study. I prepare. You see, everyone has a story, and your story is very interesting." "Interesting? You've been terrorizing me. You've invaded my life. You've watched me every single day." My voice cracked as I shouted, fury and fear blending into a single chaotic emotion. He nodded slowly, as if he expected my anger. "Yes, and now you're here. That's the part one was waiting for, the confrontation. The choice. Everyone reaches a point where they must face the story written for them." "What story?" "Mine," I demanded, stepping closer, shaking my flashlight toward him. "You've made it a nightmare." He closed the notebook gently. "Maybe, but the story was already there. I just revealed it. You have a choice now. You can continue to hide, live in fear, or you can confront it. Face it. Take control. Only then does it end." I paused. The words didn't make sense at first, but slowly the realization hit me. This wasn't about him hurting me for sport. This wasn't random. Somehow he wanted me to overcome this fear, to fight back, to reclaim my life. I shook my head, disbelief and exhaustion swirling. "And if I refuse, then the story continues," he said, standing, towering over me in the darkness. "And you'll never escape it." For a long moment, I just stared at him, trying to process everything. The whispers, the notes, the stalking. It all made sense in a strange, twisted way. This had been a test, a trial of some sort. And now it was up to me to decide the outcome. I took a deep breath. "I refuse to let fear control me anymore," I said firmly. "I'm done hiding." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. That's the first step." And then, almost imperceptibly, he vanished. I blinked, heart racing, scanning the room. The chair was empty. The notebook lay on the floor. I picked it up, flipping through the pages. All of the observations, the sketches, the maps, everything was gone. Empty pages. It was as if he had never been there, except for the lingering weight of his presence in my mind. I left the house, stepping into the crisp night air. Maple Street was quiet again, normal even. The terror that had followed me for weeks suddenly felt distant, like a nightmare I was finally waking from. Over the next few days, life slowly returned to something resembling normal. I stayed vigilant but no longer paranoid. The fear that had dominated my thoughts began to fade, and in its place, a strange sense of empowerment grew. I had survived, confronted the unknown, and reclaimed my life. I never saw the stranger again. The notes stopped, the glimpses disappeared, and the darkness that had seemed to follow me lifted. It was as if he had never existed, except for the lesson he left behind. Fear is only as powerful as the control you give it, and confronting it is the only way to truly move forward. Anna, my best friend, and a few neighbors noticed the change. I smiled more, walked with confidence, and finally felt safe in my own home. The paranoia, the dread, the constant anxiety. It was gone, replaced by a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. Months later, I drove past the Parker house. It looked just as abandoned as before. Paint peeling, windows boarded, shadows stretching across the walls in the evening light. I didn't hesitate. I didn't look back. I knew I'd face the fear.
Ide surviva.
And my life would continue. Sometimes late at night, when the wind rustles the leaves on Maple Street, I think I feel a presence. Faint, almost imperceptible. But instead of fear, I feel calm. I know I faced it once, and I could do it again. Life isn't about avoiding the darkness. It's about stepping into it, standing tall, and finding your own light. And that's exactly what I did. This was the end of the story. Now let's go to the next story. When I was a kid, there was a place in town that everyone whispered about, the house at Willow Creek. It wasn't the biggest, nor the oldest house, but there was something about it that drew people's curiosity and fear. Kids dared each other to run up the front steps and touch the door. Teenagers used it as the ultimate test of bravery. Adults rarely talked about it, but when they did, their voices dropped, and their eyes darted as if the walls themselves might be listening. For me, that house wasn't just a rumor. It was part of my life. It all started when my uncle, who had been away for years, suddenly returned to town and shocked everyone by buying the house. People thought he was insane. They whispered that no one lasted there for long. But he waved off all the talk, laughing in that booming way of his, saying, "Ghosts don't pay the bills, and if they do, I'll let them stay rent-free." I was 14 then, curious, restless, and already feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. My uncle invited me to spend the summer with him at the house, promising an adventure you'll never forget. I didn't need much convincing. My parents were fighting constantly, and my home didn't feel like a home anymore. So, one humid June evening, I packed a bag and moved into the Willow Creek house. From the moment I stepped inside, I knew it was different. The floorboards groaned under my sneakers, but not in the normal way. The sound seemed deliberate, almost like the wood was reacting to me personally. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust, mixed with something metallic I couldn't place. The walls were covered with faded wallpaper that peeled at the edges, revealing strange markings beneath. Scratches, almost like claw marks, carved directly into the wood. My uncle brushed it off. "Old houses have character," he said, though I caught him staring a little too long at the marks before pulling a curtain across them. The first week was uneventful, mostly filled with chores. My uncle was restoring the place, patching holes, sanding floors, painting walls. I helped where I could, but mostly I explored. There were endless hallways, twisting staircases, and doors that seemed to lead somewhere different every time I opened them. At night, though, things changed. I started noticing sounds that didn't belong. Sometimes, it was faint whispers drifting through the halls, too soft to make out but too distinct to ignore. Other times, I'd hear footsteps on the second floor when I knew no one was there. Once, I woke to the sound of something scratching at my bedroom door, like nails dragging slowly across the wood. When I opened it, nothing, just the empty hallway stretching into shadows. The strangest thing, though, was the mirror. In the main hallway stood an enormous, antique mirror with a heavy gold frame. The first time I walked past it, I noticed my reflection didn't match me exactly. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but enough to make me stop. My reflection's eyes seemed just a little too dark, the corners of its mouth tugging upward when I wasn't smiling. When I leaned closer, my reflection did too, but there was a slight delay, like it had to think before moving. I told my uncle. He laughed it off at first, saying I'd been reading too many ghost stories. But when I insisted, his face grew serious. He told me to stay away from the mirror. His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it, his eyes darting to it like he was afraid. "Don't touch it," he said. "Don't look into it too long. Just ignore it." Easier said than done. Every time I passed it, I felt it watching me. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of movement in the glass, even when I wasn't looking directly at it. Shadows darting, faces flickering behind me. Once, I swore I saw someone standing in the reflection at the far end of the hallway. even though the hallway was empty when I turned. By the second week, I was struggling to sleep. The whispers grew louder, sometimes calling my name in voices I almost recognized. My uncle, too, started acting strange. He would stay up late, pacing the house, muttering to himself. His booming laugh disappeared, replaced by tense silences and quick glances at the mirror whenever he passed it. He began locking certain doors at night, keeping a heavy brass key on a chain around his neck. One night, I woke up and found my uncle standing in front of the mirror, whispering. He wasn't talking like he usually did. His words were low, hushed, like he was speaking to someone who might not belong in this world. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I heard him say, "Not yet. He's not ready." That's when I realized he was talking about me. From that night on, I started watching him closely. The more I noticed, the more things didn't add up. He never let me into the basement. He grew pale and exhausted, as if something was draining him. And the scratches in the wallpaper, they seemed to multiply, crawling across the walls like they were alive. Then came the night I finally followed him. I waited until past midnight, when I heard his footsteps creak across the floor. He carried a candle, its flame flickering against the peeling wallpaper, casting shadows that danced like they had minds of their own. He walked to a door I had never seen unlocked before, the one to the basement. With that brass key, he opened it slowly, glancing behind him as though afraid someone might follow. But I did. The stairs were steep, the air colder with each step. The candlelight revealed stone walls, lined with old shelves covered in dust and cobwebs. At the far end of the basement stood something that made my stomach twist. Another mirror, but this one was shattered. Its broken pieces were scattered across the floor, sharp shards glinting in the candlelight. My uncle knelt before it, whispering again, but his voice cracked with desperation. I crept closer, heart pounding in my chest, and I heard him say, "Just a little longer. He'll be ready soon." I didn't know if he was talking to me or the thing inside the mirror. The days following that shocking revelation blurred into a haze of conversations, silences, and moments that carried a weight I wasn't ready for. After Anna's confession about her past connection with Greg, my mind wouldn't stop spinning. It was like every word she'd said was etched into my brain, replaying on loop as I tried to make sense of what this meant for us. That night, after she told me, we didn't talk much more. I remember sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor while she lay down behind me, clutching a pillow like it was her last anchor. At one point, I heard her muffled sobs. I wanted to reach out, but I couldn't. My hands wouldn't move, like they were chained down by everything I was feeling. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and somewhere deep in the mess, a flicker of compassion that I didn't know what to do with. The following morning, I left for work early. She texted me twice, saying she wanted to talk, that she loved me, that she hadn't meant for me to find out this way. I ignored the first one. When the second came in, I stared at it for 10 minutes before I typed back just 3 words. "I need time." At the office, I couldn't focus. My coworkers probably thought I was hungover or sick because I kept zoning out. Every coffee sip turned sour in my mouth. At lunch, I just sat there while my buddy joked about the weekend plans, and all I could think about was Anna's face when she told me she had been with Greg. That look of fear, of guilt, of vulnerability. It was burned into me. By the time I got home, I expected maybe she'd give me space. Instead, she was in the kitchen, dinner half prepared, like she was trying to prove something. The smell of garlic and onions filled the air, but it only made the heaviness worse. She looked at me as I walked in, eyes swollen and red. "Can we talk now?" I didn't answer right away. I dropped my keys on the counter, set my bag down, and leaned against the wall. "What is there to say? You already told me everything." Her hands trembled as she gripped the counter. "No, I didn't. I only told you part of it because I panicked. Please, just sit down with me. Let me explain everything before you make up your mind." Something in her voice stopped me from walking away, so I sat. She poured out everything, every detail. She told me how she and Greg had met when she was 19, how it was brief but intense, how he wasn't good for her. Manipulative, toxic, the kind of guy who thrived on control. She said he left scars on her, Not the kind you could see, but the kind that stuck deep inside. She admitted she carried those scars into our relationship without even realizing how heavy they still were. Then she told me the part that hurt the most. She had never fully let go of that piece of her past. She claimed she never cheated on me, never thought about it. But some nights she'd dream about Greg, about the chaos he brought, and she'd wake up shaking. She swore she didn't want him, but she hadn't told me because she thought I'd see her differently. By the end, she was crying so hard she could barely breathe. I sat there, silent, listening, my stomach twisted in knots. Finally, I asked, "Why now? Why tell me this now, when we were about to get married?" Her voice cracked as she answered, "Because I don't want to carry secrets into our marriage. And because when Greg showed up at the wedding rehearsal, it terrified me. I realized if he ever tried to come back into my life, I couldn't handle it unless you knew everything." Greg had been there. I hadn't seen him, but she swore he'd been lurking in the back. That piece of information hit me like a truck. I clenched my fists, jaw tight. "He's still around?" I asked. She nodded. "But I don't want him. I only want you. I love you. Please, believe me." The room felt suffocating. On one hand, I saw her pain, her honesty, the courage it took to finally admit all of this. On the other, I felt this deep sense of betrayal. Not because she'd been with someone before me, I could live with that, but because she had hidden the weight of it for so long. The next few days turned into this silent dance. We went through the motions, work, meals, sleep, but we barely spoke. She gave me space, which I appreciated, but I could feel her fear every time I walked past her. It was like she thought I'd vanish at any second. Then something unexpected happened. Greg called me. It was a random evening, and I didn't recognize the number at first. When I picked up, his voice came through like poison. "Hey, Mike, I think we need to talk about Anna." My blood boiled instantly. "You have no business calling me." He laughed, low and mocking. "Relax. I'm not trying to steal her. Just thought you should know what you're really dealing with. She'll never stop thinking about me. You're just the safe choice." Every word was like gasoline on fire. I gripped the phone so hard it hurt. "Stay away from her. If I see you near her again, you'll regret it." He chuckled. "We'll see." Then he hung up. I stood there, shaking with rage. My first instinct was to tell Anna, but a darker part of me wondered if she already knew, if she'd been in contact with him all along. When I confronted her, she swore she hadn't spoken to him in years. She broke down again, begging me to believe her. I wanted to, I really did, but the doubt lingered like a shadow in the back of my mind. The next few weeks were chaos. Greg kept popping up, once outside Anna's work, once near our apartment. Each time, he'd disappear before I could do anything. It was like he was playing some sick game, trying to break us apart. Through it all, Anna kept pleading with me to stay strong, to trust her. She said Greg was trying to manipulate me the same way he used to manipulate her. And maybe she was right. Maybe he was just trying to destroy what we had. But I couldn't deny the fear that gnawed at me. What if he succeeded? One night, everything came to a head. Anna came home late from work, shaken. She said Greg had cornered her in the parking lot, said things that made her feel sick, things about their past that she'd never told me. When she got home, she collapsed in my arms, sobbing, terrified. That night, something shifted in me. For the first time in weeks, I stopped seeing her as the source of my pain and started seeing Greg as the enemy. It wasn't Anna who had hurt me. It was him. He was still controlling her, still trying to control me, even after all these years. And I realized, if we didn't put an end to this, he would haunt us forever. So I made a decision. We weren't going to hide anymore. We weren't going to let him dictate the terms of our lives. If we were going to survive, as a couple, as people, we had to face Greg head-on, no matter what it took. That was the night everything truly began to spiral. The night the line between past and present blurred so much it nearly broke us. The night Greg decided to make his presence known again. It hit like a storm I couldn't control. Anna and I had spent the evening talking, planning, strategizing how to finally put an end to his games. But nothing could have prepared me for the chaos that followed. It started with a knock at the door, 3 sharp, deliberate raps that made my heart slam against my chest. My first instinct was to ignore it, but a creeping sense of dread urged me to look through the peephole. There he was, Greg. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. His eyes were sharp, almost predatory, and they carried that same old arrogance that had always made me hate him. He looked calm, casual even, as if he was taking a stroll through our lives just to see how broken we'd become. Anna froze behind me, her hand clutching mine so tightly it hurt. He shouldn't be here, she whispered, but there was no mistaking the fear in her eyes. I unlocked the door cautiously, keeping a hand on my pocket in case I needed to shove him back or worse. Greg pushed past me before I could even speak. "Relax," he said smoothly. "I just wanted to talk." I stepped in front of Anna. "You're not talking to her. Not tonight. Not ever again." He laughed. "Well, menacing. You really think you can protect her from me? That you can control her life? Kid, you have no idea." Something inside me snapped. Every ounce of fear, doubt, and anger converged into a single surge of adrenaline. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall, my knuckles bruising his shirt. "You stay away from her," I growled, my voice trembling more from fury than fear. "You hear me? One more step, and I swear." Greg smirked. "One more step? You think this ends with a threat? You don't even know the half of it." Anna stepped forward, voice shaking but firm. "Greg, stop it. Leave, please." He turned his gaze on her, a flicker of something I couldn't identify. Nostalgia? Regret? No, it was manipulation, pure and raw. "I didn't come here to hurt you. Not really. I just want you to know the truth." "The truth?" I shouted. "We don't want to hear it." And that's when he dropped the bomb. "Anna," he said slowly, carefully, "you don't know the worst part. He's not the only one who knows about us. Someone else. Someone you trust. They've been watching everything." The room went still. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded deafening. My heart started racing. Who could he mean? Who else could know about us? I wanted to attack him again, but Anna held me back, shaking her head. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered. He smiled that sick, twisted smile and leaned closer to me. "You're gonna wish you had listened." Then, just as suddenly as he arrived, he left. No fight, no explanation, just gone into the night like a shadow. Anna and I were left standing in the living room, hearts pounding, minds spinning, and the looming weight of uncertainty pressing down on us. The next few days were tense. We installed new locks, added cameras, and changed routines constantly. Every knock at the door made us jump. Every call from an unknown number sent shivers down our spines. And then we got the email. It was from Greg. No words, just a video attachment. I hesitated before opening it, but Anna insisted. "We have to know what he's planning. We can't hide forever." The video started innocuously. Footage of our apartment, clear, high definition, showing Anna and me as we went about our lives. And then, there was a man in the background. Not Greg, someone else. Watching, recording. My stomach dropped. My fists clenched. My blood felt icy. Anna turned to me, tears brimming. "I told you," he said. "Someone else knew. Someone else has been watching." That's when I realized just how deep this had gone. Greg wasn't just a manipulative ex. He had a network, a plan, and we were trapped inside it. We decided we couldn't stay. We packed essentials, threw them into our car, and drove off without looking back. Every streetlight, every shadow seemed like a threat. We found a small town a few hours away, a place nobody knew us, a place that felt like a temporary refuge. But even there, the sense of being watched never fully left. Anna and I leaned on each other more than ever. We talked, we cried, we tried to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. But the fear was always there. That fear became a strange kind of glue, binding us together in ways nothing else could. One night, I asked her, "Do you think we'll ever be free from him?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but I do know one thing, we have each other. That's all that matters right now." We held each other, staring out the window at the quiet street, trying to convince ourselves that life could still be normal, that love could survive even the darkest betrayals. Months passed. Greg never contacted us again directly. His presence, however, lingered like a shadow over every decision we made. But slowly, we started to reclaim our lives. Anna went back to school, I threw myself into work, and we created routines that didn't revolve around fear. We never forgot, though. Every time the wind howled, every time a stranger smiled a little too long, our hearts skipped a beat. But we survived. And that survival, that stubborn refusal to let the past dictate our future, made us stronger. We learned that trust isn't given lightly, that love doesn't erase pain, that the past can haunt you, but it doesn't have to define you. And most importantly, we learned that some battles aren't fought with fists or anger, but with patience, resilience, and the courage to keep moving forward, even when every step feels like walking on broken glass. This was the end of the story. Now let's go to the next story.